Interest rates could rise to 6% as opposition to the Chancellor's mini-budget grows.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 28th of September. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and Paul Hawkins. Here's what's making the news this morning.
Financial markets predicting interest rates will rise to 6% amid continued economic turmoil. The increase will affect millions of homeowners, with first-time buyers scrambling to secure deals before the rate hike.
It comes as the International Monetary Fund calls on the government to reconsider its strategy of tax cuts for the highest earners.
The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to establish a state-owned energy company in his first year in office if he's elected as Prime Minister.
And European leaders have accused Russia of sabotage after explosions around the Nord Stream pipelines, which caused gas to leak, into the Baltic Sea.
And as always, we'd love you to be part of the conversation here at GB News. We are, of course, the People's Channel, so get in touch, GB Views at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GB News. So our top story this morning then, Kwasi Kwarteng continues to try and calm financial markets amid predictions that the Bank of England will have to raise interest rates to 6%.
Yesterday, the Chancellor met with city bosses and attempted to reassure them, saying that he was confident in the government's long-term strategy.
Well, today, he'll meet with representatives from Wall Street after the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said she was monitoring developments in the UK.
With us now is the Chief Economist at Panmure Gordon, Simon French. Simon, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Are you reassured?
Well, Kwasi Kwarteng's doing the right thing, but you could have argued he should have been doing this last week rather than this week, because reassuring the markets you have a plan, you have a strategy, the sort of underlying, if you like, method to what is seen in the markets as a bit of madness, is the type of thing you do to prepare the ground for a budget statement, not what you do retrospectively when the markets have already largely drawn their own conclusion.
But that being said, the comments that he made that I've certainly read in the papers this morning at those meetings yesterday with city bosses were pretty much just a repeat of the same lines that we've heard from Liz Truss's campaign and from him over the course of the last few days, which has very much been, this is about going for growth, this is about, trying to attract investment. What was said yesterday that was new that has reassured the city in any way?
Nothing, and I don't think the city are necessarily looking for a policy U-turn. What they're looking for is credibility of the people who surround Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss. The problem has been that the voices that have come out in support of this project are not the most credible voices in financial markets. And a lot of the, if you like, the grown-ups, the Bank of England, the Treasury...
What kind of voices? When you say those voices that aren't trusted, what kind of voices?
Well, you're talking about, whatever one's view of Brexit over the last 6 years, the economists that have supported Brexit in 2016 promised a version of Brexit that hasn't crystallised. So when they're now talking about this plan for growth raising the UK's trend growth, you might want to give the government the benefit of the doubt, you might want to give those voices the benefit of the doubt, but you're also looking at the last 6 years and what was promised and what was delivered as being quite diametrically opposite and saying, how credible is that? It all comes back to credibility. If you can boost that credibility, the markets will give you the benefit of the doubt. If you don't have it, they'll behave like they have in recent weeks.
And where are gilt yields looking this morning? Because in many ways, I'm told the gilt yields are almost more of the story than sterling. And, average Joe can understand sterling because we all deal in currency. But gilt yields is where traditionally we were on safe ground in this country, and they're all over the place.
That's right. So this is the price or the year interest rate at which the government can borrow. And for many of the last few years, it's been hovering around 1-2%. 5 to 6% is currently the interest rate. What that means is that passes through pretty quickly, pretty instantaneously to the mortgage market. Now, there are 80% of mortgage holders who are on a fixed rate deal, but it's as those fixed rate deals come to an end, and it's about 1/3 households per quarter, so about 1.2 million per year, whose deals come to an end. They have to go back into the market to try and find a new deal. They could have been securing it back in January at 1.5%, maybe 2%. They're now looking at 5 to 6%. That is thousands of pounds increase in the mortgage market as a direct result of those gilt prices you mentioned.
Yeah, and this morning as well from the IMF, essentially telling the government that this is going to increase inequality, that the government needs to rethink this. How will the markets feel about that?
Well, I'm not sure it's the IMF's role, the International Monetary Fund, to be talking about inequality. That is a much more of a political issue. But the economics behind what they're trying to say, which is, a lot of the, if you like, the institutional credibility we've just spoken about isn't there, is a salient warning. And whether you believe the International Monetary Fund have a good record, they are listened to by institutional investors. There is a signal provided there, which means people sat in Washington, Berlin, Beijing, thinking about allocating capital to the UK, they see warnings like that, and they're less likely to do it as a result.
And what about Janet Yellen's intervention, the US Treasury Secretary, saying she's monitoring what's happening in the UK? I mean, they clearly think that this is unexpected, almost sort of non-rational behaviour from the UK. I mean, how much does that affect things?
Well, I was on calls to US clients yesterday, and comments from both Janet Yellen, the current Treasury Secretary, and a former Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, who also opined quite negatively on the UK. It frames expectations. And again, you can disagree with them. It's fine. It's healthy, actually, to disagree with people. But they hold very important roles, or have held very important roles. They influence behaviour. There's a signalling there. It's a real problem for the government, for investors in the UK, to absorb that stuff and say, it's all fine. I'm afraid it isn't all fine. The markets, however, need to see signs between now and the 23rd of November, when we get a budget, that the government is surrounding itself by voices who can speak truth to power. That's the problem, is if you've got people who are not prepared to say, look, we don't think this is the right path, then you have a sort of a breakdown of what ultimately generates good governance.
Well, actually, alluding to that, in the statement from the Bank of England on Monday, it said they welcome the role of the Office of Budget Responsibility, which was a kind of coded way of saying you're going to have to give us some forecasts.
Yes. And within that, the Office of Budget Responsibility are going to be tasked with saying by the end of the forecast horizon, so 3 years, it could be extended out to 5 years, they want to see debt as a proportion of the economy falling. That feels like a fiscal rule, some sort of discipline that the markets are looking for. There wasn't a forecast in the plan for growth, the mini budget.
One was offered.
Well, one was offered, but it wasn't
declined.
accepted. And this is the point. For political reasons, Liz Truss, during the Tory leadership campaign, and some of her supporters were quite critical of the Bank of England, the Office for Budget Responsibility. On day 2 of Kwasi Kwarteng's tenure as Chancellor, he sacked the top civil servant in the Treasury. People see this. The idea that people aren't sort of watching this, people are watching that, and they take that as signals that you're not surrounding yourself with grown-up people who are prepared to be independent, impartial, give you sensible advice when the chips are down. If you're going to just surround yourself with sycophants, that presents a problem, and markets see that.
I just want your thoughts on what your reaction will be, what the market's reaction will be if, as the Chancellor is heavily hinting and indicating, there will be further tax cuts.
Tax cuts per se are not a bad thing. I think
It's more the borrowing.
Yeah, it's how you go about delivering those tax cuts. What is your broader plan? The idea mentioned in recent days is that tax cuts generate more incentives to invest, to grow. I have to say the evidence from economic research is pretty mixed on that front, so doesn't necessarily have a lot of credibility. But the point is, if you tour the new TV studios, as the Chancellor did on Sunday, offering up, if you like, sound bites at a time when the market on Friday said, well, what you've announced in terms of firm policy proposals we're a bit sceptical on, you're layering on uncertainty. I don't think that was a particularly smart decision. And that speaks actually to the point of who was in Kwasi Kwarteng's ear over the weekend saying, actually, maybe just hold back and see how financial markets absorb this before you start explicitly promising more.
Pushing the pound down further, which is exactly what happened on Monday morning. Really interesting to get your analysis.
Yeah.
Simon French, thank you very much. Chief Economist at investment bank Panmure Gordon. Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously Labour making a lot of hay out of what is happening on the markets, and with Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget. Sir Keir Starmer pledging to establish a publicly owned energy company to help promote growth in the UK yesterday.
Well, the Labour leader used a speech at his party's conference to accuse the Conservatives of crashing the pound, as he said Labour would create a fresh start for the UK. Our political reporter Catherine Forster has the story.
As Keir Starmer breakfasted with his wife in Liverpool, he had reason to be cheerful. A YouGov poll gave Labour a huge 17% lead over the Conservatives, as financial jitters continued over Chancellor Kwarteng's package of tax cuts and borrowing. Starmer's leader's speech, in contrast to last year's overlong and underpowered offering, sent the hall to its feet over and over again, as Labour sensed power as possible. On the Conservatives, he was brutal.
The government has lost control of the British economy. And for what? Not for you, not for working people, for tax cuts for the richest 1% in our society. Don't forget, don't forgive. They used to lecture us about fixing the roof when the sun was shining. But take a look around Britain. They haven't just failed to fix the roof. They've ripped out the foundations, smashed through the windows, and now they've blown the doors off for good measure. Their record is appalling. The worst decade of growth in 2 centuries. Or, as the Chancellor puts it, a vicious cycle of stagnation.
Along with pledges of far more NHS doctors and nurses, he pledged 70% home ownership and had a bold plan for energy security.
So we will set up Great British Energy within the first year of a Labour government. Green and growth don't just go together. They're inseparable. The future wealth of this country is in our air, in our seas, in our skies. Britain should harness that wealth and share it with all. British power to the British people.
And finally,
we are the party of the centre ground. Once again, the political wing of the British people. Say it loud and believe it. Britain will deal with the cost of living crisis. Britain will get its future back. A country where aspiration is rewarded, where working people succeed, a force for good in the world, a clean energy superpower, a fairer, greener, more dynamic nation. This is my commitment to you, the national mission of the next Labour government. And together with the British people, we will do it. Thank you, Conference.
So echoes of Tony Blair, a figure for so long considered toxic after the Iraq War, but no more. Not everyone's happy within the Labour tent, especially on the left, those erstwhile supporters of Jeremy Corbyn. Remember him? Labour has been on quite a journey. But the mood is more energetic and optimistic than it's been for years, as Starmer drags the party back towards the centre and, he hopes, power. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Well, our political, yeah, it is interesting. Interesting times. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is in Liverpool for us and takes a look ahead to the final day of Labour conference.
Well, it's the last day of Labour Party conference here in Liverpool, and it's fair to say the party's in a pretty buoyant mood. Maybe unsurprisingly, given the fact that Sir Keir Starmer's speech seemed to have gone down pretty well, even with his critics focused on ambition, on house building, on sorting out the energy crisis. But also, Labour feel that this is their moment. We heard that, didn't we, from Sir Keir Starmer? And when you look at the opinion polls, the highest they've been for decades. The Labour lead, according to some, up to 17 points. And the very fact that the parties remained almost entirely united during this conference, in contrast to last year, there is a sense that Keir Starmer has not just taken Labour quite a long way from that 2019 defeat, but the voters out there are starting to listen to the party. Now, there are still big questions, of course, for Labour, not least of all, can they climb that mountain electorally? They had the worst result they'd seen since the 1930s back in 2019. It is a long way to go. But also, are the public falling in love with Keir Starmer and Labour, or are they falling out of love with the government? Quite difficult to work out, essentially. Are Labour doing well because of the government, or are they managing to win back voters? Keir Starmer's definitely got a big job still on his hands, but the focus here, as I say, will be one in which they are pretty happy, pretty confident. They do actually think they've got a good shot at the next general election. What's going to happen next is we're going to have some final speeches today from Angela Rayner, Labour's deputy leader, also from Wes Streeting, who will take to the stage later on this morning. And then we get a chance to actually interview Sir Keir Starmer. I'll be talking to him at around lunchtime today. You'll be able to watch that this afternoon on GB News.
Right, with the time at 14 minutes past 6, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines.
Kemi Badenoch has set her sights on US investments in her first overseas visit to New York as Trade Secretary. The visit will see her attempt to boost trade links between the countries. It comes just days after Prime Minister Liz Truss admitted that a post-Brexit free trade deal with the US may remain out of reach for a few years to come.
People are being urged to have flu and COVID vaccines as experts become increasingly worried about a bad flu spike this winter. Officials at the UK Health Security Agency warn there'll be lower levels of natural immunity to flu this year following a series of winters when people socialised less during the pandemic. Around 33 million people in England will be eligible for a free flu vaccine this year.
Royal Mail will strike a further 19 times in the next 2 months as talks break down over pay and conditions. The Communication Workers Union says the action in October and November will run over peak mail periods such as Black Friday and the Christmas build-up. Right, there are some pictures in the papers, I believe.
There are. Lovely Kate Middleton, or we should say Princess
George.
Kate.
Is it? No, it's Kate with other kids. It's not with George, is it?
Upstaged, no less, by Theo Crompton, 4 years old, at Holyhead Lifeboat Station in North Wales. It's in lots of the papers. Apparently been waiting there for hours for her. And God love him, gave us some flowers. And you can tell she's a natural with little ones, can't you? She's got kids of her own. And just charming the people of Wales as they sort of become used to their new roles of Princess and Prince of Wales.
Yeah,
and apparently William's going to turn his hand to trying to learn a bit more of the Welsh language, which I know will go down really, really well in Wales, of course.
Yeah.
And of course, we know Prince Charles worked hard on that, didn't he, when he was the Prince of Wales. So I wonder if William has the same sort of linguistic... What's
ability.
The word?
I'm sure he'll give it the best. Yeah.
Lack of ability.
Yeah.
And again, not that the Crown is real life, but there's huge swathes of the Crown where he goes for his lessons in Aberystwyth, learning Welsh. Yeah, he's a very committed learner. And I think it went down well in Wales, but I'm not sure if William will be spending as much time.
Yeah. Well, it always goes down well in any country when you're speaking the language, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, always helps.
No investiture. What did you think of that?
Missing a bit of ceremony, a bit of pomp, does it really matter? I don't know.
Well, I wonder if that's a reaction to perhaps some of the commentary that, goodness me, it was terrible to lose Her Majesty the Queen, but it did go on for a long time, the period of mourning. There was an awful lot. And perhaps in this cost of living crisis, there's a feeling, we've got the coronation next year. Do we really need an investiture as well? Perhaps there was that reflection.
GBviews at gbnews.uk if you want to feed back to us on that one. More importantly, frankly, let's be honest, if you want to buy a house, if you own a house, if you're looking to remortgage, big problems. Potential house buyers rushing to secure mortgages at favourable rates before a predicted rise in interest rates.
Yeah, the Bank of England said on Monday it would not hesitate to hike rates after the pound hit record lows.
But with some lenders clawing back mortgage deals for new customers, how easy is it to buy a new property? Alice Porter has been finding out.
Serena is a 24-year-old charity worker hoping to buy her first property. She's urgently trying to secure a mortgage before interest rates increase even further.
My mortgage broker actually proactively called me this morning saying that she'd been advising all of her clients to get on the ladder now and just get in there, get a mortgage agreement because interest rates are only going to go up and property prices are only going to go up. And the last thing I want to do is make a rod for my own back and wait too long and everything's much more expensive than it is now.
So we've recently heard that some mortgage deals are being withdrawn by mortgage providers, by building societies. Is that making you feel quite panicked about your decision?
I'd rather have the time to explore my options a bit more because right now I am restricted and that I can pretty much only get a 1-bed, and I was looking at, if I wait a couple of months I could maybe save up a little bit more and get a 2-bed, but now that option's just been completely taken away.
But not everyone can easily exchange on properties at the moment. For the hundreds and thousands of people who own properties with unsafe cladding, like Paul Afshar, they're unable to sell their homes amid spiralling costs.
In 2007, when I bought my flat, the interest on my mortgage rate was 3.5%. As of September, it's now well over 5%, and that's only going to keep going up. A big part of the problem was that I got a bad deal on my mortgage originally because I was a first-time buyer and I was buying through the government shared ownership scheme. And that bad deal, unfortunately, is coming back to haunt me with the very real and very scary prospect of spiralling costs thanks to continued interest rate rises.
Some economists have predicted that the Bank of England will raise interest rates to 5.8% by spring, which will make it less attractive to buy a new property. At the same time,
today we have cut stamp duty.
The Chancellor's announcement that stamp duty is being cut shows that the government is trying to fuel the housing market. The question is, will it benefit people if they can't afford the mortgage repayments in the first place? But estate agents are calling for calm after a turbulent few days and say even with the increases, interest rates are still low.
The biggest problems people had during Brexit times, financial crisis times and so on, was they couldn't afford to buy properties. It was a case of lenders weren't lending. So now it's a case of lenders are still lending, interest rates are still low. There is obviously concern with the market or where the market's heading, but ultimately, if something's at the right price, buyers should be buying.
For many buyers, their conundrum now is whether to fix their interest rates or wait to see if the forecasts are wrong. Alice Porter, GB News.
We'll be going through the papers in around 15-20 minutes' time, but I was just having a flick through the mail then. Sarah Vine calls one of their columnists saying, put people's homes at risk and it's game over for the Tories. Do not threaten an Englishman's castle. Do you agree? Let us know your thoughts. GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Coming up, we'll ask the Evening Standard's defence editor Robert Fox what he makes of accusations that Russia sabotaged the Nord Stream pipelines. But first, the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A bright and breezy day for many of us. Further scattered showers to come, especially around eastern and western coasts. But in between the showers, there will be some sunshine. The more prolonged rain that we saw yesterday in the southwest, now pushing away. These weather fronts responsible for that. And low pressure still close by. Isabel's a bit more spaced out, so the wind not quite as brisk, but it is still fairly breezy out there, especially in the north and down the east coast. That breeze bringing further showers to northern Scotland into southeast Scotland, as well as parts of eastern England. Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest seeing showers as well. One or two popping up further away as well, but away from the showers, some sunny spells, and out of the wind, a little bit warmer compared with yesterday. 15, 16, perhaps 17 Celsius in some favoured spots. Into the evening, some more prolonged rain topples in from the North Sea quite quickly across eastern Scotland and then into northern England, the Midlands, as well as eventually southern parts of England and South Wales. It turns more showery as it moves south, but there will be some heavy bursts associated with that. Away from there, further showers to come into the north, but clear spells in between. And temperatures not falling quite as far. We're looking at mid to high single figures generally. So a fairly bright start to Thursday. Some sunshine in places once the showery rain has moved away from the south. But further showers arrive, especially for northern England and eastern Scotland. Those showers coming in on a northeasterly breeze. And away from the showers, there will be some sunshine, but of course that northeasterly is going to make it feel cool across parts of eastern Scotland and northeast England. In the south, I think 16 or 17 Celsius out of the wind, feeling pleasant enough. However, on Friday, some heavy rain arrives from the west. That will be prolonged in the west during the morning, pushing into the east by the afternoon, accompanied by strong winds, bright spells and showers on Saturday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 6:25, still to come on today's programme.
At 7:10, with a massive hike in interest rates expected in the coming months, we'll find out what the current economic instability means for homeowners and first-time buyers, crucially.
And at 7:45, with the pound plummeting, we'll find out the best holiday destinations to make your money go further as flight fares for the upcoming October half-term skyrocket.
And keep those thoughts coming in. Lots of views already. We'll be sharing lots with you just as soon as we can.
Let's talk about Russia
Yes.
then. It's been accused of sabotage after multiple explosions on the Nord Stream pipelines caused gas to leak into the Baltic Sea.
Well, last night, the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, said those responsible for the sabotage will be made to pay. We're joined now by Robert Fox, defence editor at the Evening Standard. Thank you very much for coming in. You wrote yesterday in your article, twist or bust. It does feel as though Putin's going crazy.
Putin's under a lot of pressure. This is absolutely clear. He's going to declare Friday that there has been an overwhelming desire of those living in these smashed-up 4 districts of southern and eastern Ukraine to be annexed by Russia. This was never on the cards before. He's under pressure, curiously, from the ultra-nationalists. Ultra-nationalists, the least realistic of all. Because in order to do what he says he's going to do, defend Mother Russia, which is now 15% added on of Ukraine, these 4 districts, he's going to need to throw in a lot more troops. Whatever troops he throws in are going to be a lot better prepared, a lot worse prepared, a lot worse motivated, and a lot worse equipped than what they've had before.
Hence these huge queues at the border with Georgia, of Russians trying to get away from this mobilisation.
Yeah, and it's going on all the way round. The further east you get, there was one village in one of the Siberian districts with 100 males, and they ordered 60 to join up. The tensions are quite clearly there. Russia, though, the bad news for the time being, is determined to fight it out. They're using things like Iranian drones. And of course, we will hear mention of the use of all means, which is taken to be code for nuclear. And there will be an overt nuclear threat of using tactical nuclear weapons. But there are other rather nasty things that the Russians have connived at, if not used before, namely chemicals in Syria. And as we were seeing, as in your headline, with the pipelines, Nord Stream 1 and 2, sabotage. Of all the navies in the area, the ones with the technical ability to do that so suddenly and almost clinically and crazily, it's Russia. It fulfills all the criteria, motivation, capability, and opportunity. And we've really got the prospect with Putin, at least, and Putinism, we've got a rogue regime. And I think that will worry the theoretical allies, practical, but more theoretical than practical, obviously what I'm talking about, namely number one, China, and then a slack handful of very strange bedfellows. They're trading a bit of oil with Saudi Arabia, a bit with Iran, but it seems to be going nowhere. Putin was supposed to be a master strategist. It's on the a card player with many, many plan B, C, D and Z even up his sleeve, and he doesn't seem to have that now, which is worrying.
So how does the West respond beyond the usual condemnations? I mean, they will announce the outcome of this referendum, they'll draw a kind of de facto board and say, right, this is all part of Russia now. There will be condemnation, but what about beyond that?
They've got to support the war economy and the war motivation, the war machine of Zelensky. It's not that this is a war that can be over in X days or 200 days. We're on day 217. And it means all kinds of things where I think you're getting a real division. I won't say that there is argument where they're saying, no, we won't do it, but you're getting a lot of hard cop, soft cop. The hard cops are US, UK, Poland, and a bit the Czech Republic and the Baltics. The soft and France. Actually, France really will be there. The soft cops are quite clearly Germany, Italy. Why should we bother? Actually, countries very oddly like the Netherlands, probably one of the wealthiest countries in the world. But you know that really is it our fight? Should we get involved in it? I think, you know, in view of what you're doing with world markets, what's happening with the budget policy and philosophy in the UK, actually another huge disruptor could be the implosion or the sheer turmoil, which isn't just Ukraine anymore. In the whole region being churned up by Russia.
And you talked about, you know, Putin having a motivation for this sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines 1 and 2. What is his motivation with that specifically? Do you think that, I mean, has the power to be hugely destabilising in Europe, or is it beginning to find alternative sources for power at the moment?
Well, very interestingly, yesterday I was writing about Mussolini, who was the first media dictator, because he invented the projection of a dictator, modern dictatorship, by film and by radio. And the Nazis, very famous for it, Annie Riefenstahl and so on, actually learned from him. Putin is very similar to Mussolini, because what was Mussolini and fascism about? Fascism was a pantomime, very nasty one in many ways, but it was about him, Il Duce, the leader. What is Putinism about? There isn't Marxism, there isn't even really a serious economic plan. It's statism run by Putin. You know, it is, I am the king, and this is why it is so worrying. But if he is asked to go on committing more troops, because it's now becoming clear that they've been attempting, the figure mentioned, to call up 300,000, but really, he has been pushing for a mobilisation, so you can say, you are my people, of over 1 million. But over 1 million who are working for a state, they don't quite know what for, they don't know what the war is about, they're not very well looked after. This is becoming a huge problem. And in fact, it looks as if we could be pointing towards his worst nightmare. His worst nightmare was the way what happened very, very early on in the independence of countries like Ukraine with the so-called colour revolutions, these spontaneous communal uprising and protests, which is what terrorizes, which frightens Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping more than anything else.
Yeah. And Jen, just very quickly, and there will be a reaction from the markets as well.
Huge, absolutely, because it means such disruption.
Yeah.
All the way round. Whether they can keep supplying India, for instance, there's going to be a crisis in manufactured diesel oil. Would you believe it? You know, the stuff that goes in heavy vehicles and so on. So, you know, we are global still. However much, you know, we're becoming more, the nationalists are gaining. Look at Italy, look at Sweden. We are so interlinked.
Yeah.
And Putin is saying, no more Mr. Nice Guy, and no more pro-Europe, but he's thrown himself absolutely into the arms of China and India, particularly China. Yeah. So he becomes the poodle to Xi Jinping's Rottweiler, whatever he wants that to be. Yeah.
Robert Fox, always great to get your analysis. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, what happens there affects what happens here. After the break, we'll be going through the papers with David Mellor and Claire Muldoon. Stay with us for that.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 6:36 and we'll be going through these in just a moment. Before that, let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning.
Kwasi Kwarteng will reportedly meet representatives from Wall Street today to reassure markets about his economic plans. The Chancellor insists he's confident his tax-cutting strategy will deliver the promised economic growth.
The Labour conference draws to a close today as the party positions itself as ready for government. Final speeches today include plans for GPs in England to give face-to-face appointments to every patient and a pledge for every primary school child to have access to a breakfast club.
The Natural History Museum and Ukrainian scientists have completed research to save some of Kyiv's historic artworks. The researchers joined forces to establish the cause of damage to some medieval murals after they developed dark spots and began flaking away.
Right, let's go through the papers then at 6:37. Joining us this morning, broadcaster Claire Muldoon and former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor. Morning to you both.
Morning.
Morning. How are we feeling about what's happening at the moment?
Oh, I mean, hopeless. I don't know. There's just not much hope. Or we never used to have doom and gloom with Mystic Mellor and Muldoon here, but I don't know. It's just, I can't swear live on TV, can I?
Yeah. Well, all the awful things I thought would happen with Liz Truss as Prime Minister have happened in spades. You've got two extremely inexperienced ministers, Kwarteng and Truss. I mean, Truss didn't even seem to know that she had to issue, she's the Prime Minister of this country, that she had to issue a statement trying to calm the market.
Where is she? Has anyone...
I haven't seen her. And the reality is that the whole idea was to stimulate the British economy in a positive way. But what they have done is loaded borrowing upon borrowing, and they have borrowed in order to offer tax cuts, which is as stupid a thing as you could possibly do. You give people tax cuts as a reward for agreeing to the government curbing public expenditure. And I just think this is really quite serious. You see, when you think last year they were borrowing money for about 1%. Now it's 5%. I mean, you will get back to the situation we had in the 70s and 80s, where the largest item of public expenditure was interest on money you'd already borrowed.
But they would say this is that's the orthodox thinking. This is going to be different. This is a different plan, and all the economists and you know, global institutions like the IMF, don't worry, stick with us, this is the plan.
Shock and awe.
Look,
just hold firm.
When I was Chief Secretary, we took public expenditure as a proportion of national wealth down to the lowest it's ever been. I never had to read any headlines like this. I mean, we are dealing with serious scale of ineptitude because, you know, it's like sending kids into a firework factory with matches. Let's throw these matches around. Let's have a big bang.
In all your experience, have you ever seen markets respond to a statement by a chancellor in the way that we saw on Friday? And have you ever seen the pound like this? I mean, record low on Monday.
No, I mean...
And gilt yields, and you know, there have to be serious questions. We're hearing yesterday from Hugh Pill from the Bank of England, hard not to draw the conclusion that all this will require a significant monetary policy response, but that's not expected until November.
Well, the reality is the Bank of England haven't really done much over the past year in any event, and they were given the keys almost to the piggy bank to say, you look after the economy, you help steer us under Boris's leadership. And now it's, as David used a brilliant analogy there, it is like kids going into a firework factory.
And the serious monetary response, you know, they have all these jargon. What they mean is sticking interest rates up. What they mean is sticking your mortgage rates up. Everyone watching this is going to suffer for this. And the result of it, look, the Labour Party is 17 points ahead of the polls. And, you know, I've seen Labour conferences, never been to one, but I've seen Labour conferences from a distance. They look confident. They even look, you know, relatively clean-cut. They sing the national anthem. They smell power. I look at Liz Truss and I smell failure.
Well, there are reports that some Conservative MPs are worried that their reputation for economic credibility could be shredded here. that has been built back up. It's taken a long time for that to be built back in, given where the Conservative Party were after we crashed out the ERM in the early 90s.
Absolutely. Well, I remember that only too.
I thought you would do.
And the point is that that credibility meant that even though the major government managed to turn the economy round, Ken Clarke was a very good chancellor, we were still thrashed, lost more than half our seats, because the public remembered. It's well remembered the ERM fiasco.
Yeah.
What fiasco are they going to remember? Now, don't forget, she's got about 2 years to turn it round. So if she thinks that the change in income tax is going to suddenly stimulate growth in this country, she hasn't got enough time.
Well, it was the quote Starmer made in his speech yesterday saying, Labour's time has come, as in 1945 and 1997. And it's exactly that sense from certainly from conference, that Labour are eyeing up number 10.
Well, of course they are, but they still have to have the votes from the people. And I think the votes from the people are still out because Labour have got a long way to come back to public confidence. So it's all very well, Starmer and et al. From the Labour Party conference shouting from their pillboxes saying, yes, we think we should have national energy back. But that's going to run like Channel 4 has been run. It'll be a public forum funded by private money. They don't seem to have any strategy to win. And as I said before, Liz Truss was actually elected. If she is elected, she will set the Conservatives up to fail at the next election.
And also, we need to move on, but you know, what are they going to do with the money? Why, they're going to hire more NHS staff. I'm sorry, but isn't that yesterday's solution to a problem that cannot be solved in that way? The NHS needs to be made more efficient and effective. The idea that we tip every penny into the NHS, come on, folks.
Yeah.
We need more grown-up politics than that.
We touched on it in relation to the housing crisis, David, but I want to go with the front of the Times. House price warning as loan rates rise sharply, but it's also been covered in the Mail, page 14, the mortgage panic. Yeah. 284 deals being pulled in mortgage panic. I noticed yesterday some products were being put back on the market, but at 5%. And as you say, if people were getting mortgages earlier this year, they were 1.5%. Yeah. And this is a real, as you say, this is getting serious now.
And what happens is that they won't lend money, you see. Their whole raison d'etre is to lend money to people who want to buy homes, but they will now stop doing that. And I think where it will get very nasty is when the mortgage rates go up, when mortgages are not available, and people will suddenly think, after 12 years of Conservative government, what's going on? What's going on?
But it's
I
not...
tell you what, I wish I thought she knew what was going on, but I don't know that she does.
I mean, the weirdest thing is, right, Friday, a lot of first-time buyers were saying, hang on, this stamp duty, you know, I can buy a property up to £425,000, get a stamp duty cut. Monday, you're thinking, actually, that's going to be completely offset by a rise in interest rates.
Exactly.
Well, even to think or to have the hope that you could actually buy somewhere, good luck to you. Because there's a lot of us out there that just can't and will never, ever, ever manage to achieve it. I mean, the thing was about people wanting pay rises, and I think the unions have to look at this as well. You know, if you want a pay rise, it's only going to go on higher interest rates. You're not going to see the benefit of it. And that's it. And they were warned about that. Yeah, it did. Absolutely, it did.
Let's talk a bit more about Labour conference. It's drawing to a close today. Big party mood going on. Paul and I were just watching a video of Wes Streeting doing karaoke on Twitter this morning. What was he singing?
He was singing Robbie Williams' Angels, but he changed it to I'm Loving Starmer instead.
We'll try and get it.
God,
we'll try.
sick. I don't like the song anyway.
We will try and get that for you to play it because it was pretty funny.
Even less
we've been told from reliable sources lots of drink has been consumed. I think that's pretty much a cross-party policy at conference, it must be said. But yesterday, awful comments being made by a Labour MP at a fringe event. Huge regret being expressed by Rupert Hook, but still suspended from the party this morning.
Well, so she should be, because the comments that she made against Kwasi Kwarteng were absolutely disgusting and they were racist. And I'm sorry, she's a bit of a live wire in any event, Rupert Hook. Regardless of whose sister she is, regardless of what party that she is, but she's now sitting in Parliament as an independent, given the fact the Labour whip has been removed. She has apologised to Kwasi Kwarteng, and David Lammy, for heaven's sake, came out and said, well, yeah, they weren't very nice comments, were they? We need robustness. We need to, we need to stand up to bullying like this. And someone in that position of power really ought not to express that language at all, regardless if in public.
But is there a danger, as with Angela Rayner making similarly inappropriate comments at a previous Labour conference, that it is actually representative of the kind of vein of thought that's running through the party, or do you think that's not a fair allegation? I mean, she called Kwasi Kwarteng superficially black, which I was trying to understand what she meant by that, and I understand that she meant that he wasn't making policies for black people, but for white people, and therefore...
That's the thing about the Labour Party. They like to have the fringes of society in their fold, and they like to be able to protect them. But I think that's keeping them down. It's a form of othering, actually, instead of all getting together regardless of your race, creed, skin colour or whatever. And in fact, the Conservatives, and I'm not a Conservative voter, but the Conservatives have actually shown more diversity in terms of sex. We've got the third female Prime Minister. In terms of cabinet members, have all been, well, mostly all been ever, the most racially diverse cabinet that we've ever had.
And I think the key phrase there, David, is it racially diverse? The criticism is not socially diverse.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, you can't have come off the dust cart to become Chancellor of the Exchequer. You have to have training. And the thing about Kwasi Kwarteng is that he's an impeccably trained
he's incredibly clever,
investment and incredibly clever. But what I think one doesn't want is any, I mean, so far his controversial tenure, it has begun controversially, but there's no suggestion that because he's a black man, he can't do the job. You know what I mean? I mean, he is blazing a trail for black people to be treated as complete equals. He's plainly extremely bright. I don't agree with some of the things he's doing, but I don't say he shouldn't be there. I say he should be there, and hopefully he will learn on the job, as we all have to do. But, all this stuff that Rupert Hook was coming out with, I'm trying to think, you'll remember the name of that American boxing promoter, and it was said, he looks black, thinks white, talks white, and thinks green.
Is it Don King?
Don King.
Yeah.
So that line of abuse about people of one colour behaving like people of another, that's an old American trope. We don't need it over here.
Did Keir Starmer act? Has he done enough? I mean, he acted very quickly to take the whip away.
Of course.
Is that enough?
Keir Starmer is a fundamentally decent man. It's very hard to pin I mean, OK, he went along with Corbyn, but people are going to forget that. He looks decent. He's articulate. It's hard to pin an extremist label on him. And so what the Tories need to understand is there's no longer a disincentive to voting Labour because of the nature of the leader.
Should we talk about woke police, Claire, in the Express? Fury as police defend trans paedophile. What's this story?
This is Sussex Police, and they're doubling down on a criticism made from their official Twitter feed. A furious police defend transgender paedophile given 18-year-old jail term. This is a transgender woman who now identifies as a woman after committing heinous paedophilic acts on children whilst a man. And this woman, this trans woman, has been jailed and put into a women's prison. And Sussex Police have said, "Hi, Sussex Police do not tolerate any hateful comments towards their gender identity, regardless of crimes committed. This is irrelevant to the crime that's been committed and investigated." Signed off, Sussex Police.
But they've been pulled up for that, haven't they?
So from mainstream media they have been, but not from who's the chief inspector just now, Rowley?
Yeah.
He's not come out and said anything against it. He's kept quiet. And there was a conference yesterday not about this, but something else. But we need to protect women. We need to protect children. We need to protect safe spaces. And I'm sorry, there have been crimes committed in prisons between transgender women and women that really can't be happening and really have to be stopped. Sorry.
I entirely agree with you, and I'm just agreeing with you because I think the problem is it's one thing to have surgery that in effect turns a man into a woman. It's quite another to have someone wandering around with full sexual equipment in a woman's prison.
Well, this is it.
Claiming to be a woman when there's been plenty of incidents.
And this
is not.
This prisoner, Sally Ann Dixon, hasn't even had. She doesn't have a certificate to say she's changed her sex, and she's not had the operation. So she is fully self-identifying, and she's ended up in a women's prison.
Well, let us know your views at home on that and on the rest of the stories we've discussed in the papers. We're going to take a break from the papers and be back with Claire and David at around, about 7:30ish.
Yeah. In the meantime, let's talk about how businesses are trying to deal with soaring energy costs. They're gearing up for those energy costs rising on October the 1st.
Well, despite government aid, including an energy price cap, many businesses will still struggle to survive the winter.
Community centres may have to close despite being essential social and business hubs for many local areas. We can join our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley, who is at a community centre in Ferrybridge. Morning, Anna.
Good morning. Yes, I'm here at Ferrybridge Community Centre. I'm joined by Rachel Speak. She's the centre manager here. And like you've said, there's been a mini budget that's been put out to help people with energy costs, including charities like this community centre here, but they're still struggling. There's £16,000 extra a year that they're going to have to find for their energy bills. And Rachel, you're saying businesses can put up their prices, but that's not something that you can do here.
No, not overall. We're here for people who haven't got the money, who need the prices to stay as they are now, generally.
And what does this community centre do for people here?
It does a lot. It's a focal point. There's businesses here. There's lots of groups here. Mental well-being, physical well-being. Hundreds of people use the centre week in, week out as a way of socialising, getting together. It's a popular place to come.
And you've set up a GoFundMe, haven't you, for £10,000 that you're looking for? But
we have, yeah. Generally, that was a panic moment, realising that we weren't going to be able to manage and we might end up closed within 3 months. But looking at the budget overall, that isn't even going to be enough to keep us open. We are looking at long-term plans to try and keep it open, but in the meantime, it's just getting enough funds to go month to month at the moment. £16,000 in our budget a year is a lot of money to generate just for your utility.
What would you need and what more help do you want from the government?
generally, they need to look after places like these. We're not a business. Like you say, we can't put up prices. People have to be able to afford to come. We live in an area that is suffering financially. So, as in help from the government, is to stop the cap what it is on charities like these, like community centres like these across the area. To me, we can't keep taking the rises. It will shut us down. After 54 years of being here, it just seems a shame that something like that could happen.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for sharing that, and I do hope this community centre stays open. It is a real part of the community, and Rachel here is looking for more funding to keep this open.
Anna, thank you so much for that.
Coming up after the break, we'll have more on what a potential 6% interest rate rise would mean for you. Before all that, though, let's find out how the weather's looking.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. A bright and breezy day for many of us. Further scattered showers to come, especially around eastern and western coasts. But in between the showers, there will be some sunshine. The more prolonged rain that we saw yesterday in the southwest, now pushing away. These weather fronts responsible for that. And low pressure still close by. Isabel's a bit more spaced out, so the wind not quite as brisk, but it is still fairly breezy out there, especially in the north and down the east coast. That breeze bringing further showers to northern Scotland, into southeast Scotland, as well as parts of eastern England. Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest seeing showers as well. One or two popping up further away as well, but away from the showers, some sunny spells, and out of the wind, a little bit warmer compared with yesterday. 15, 16, perhaps 17 Celsius in some favoured spots. Into the evening, some more prolonged rain topples in from the North Sea quite quickly across eastern Scotland and then into northern England, the Midlands, as well as eventually southern parts of England and South Wales. It turns more showery as it moves south, but there will be some heavy bursts associated with that. Away from there, further showers to come into the north, but clear spells in between. And temperatures not falling quite as far. We're looking at mid to high single figures generally. So a fairly bright start to Thursday. Some sunshine in places once the showery rain has moved away from the south. But further showers arrive, especially for northern England and eastern Scotland. Those showers coming in on a northeasterly breeze. And away from the showers, there will be some sunshine, but of course that northeasterly is going to make it feel cool across parts of eastern Scotland and northeast England. In the south, I think 16 or 17 Celsius out of the wind, feeling pleasant enough. However, on Friday, some heavy rain arrives from the west. That will be prolonged in the west during the morning, pushing into the east by the afternoon, accompanied by strong winds, bright spells and showers on Saturday.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Faro.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Interest rates could rise to 6% as opposition to the Chancellor's mini-budget grows.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Wednesday the 28th of September. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Financial markets are predicting interest rates will rise to 6% amid continued economic turmoil. The increase will affect millions of homeowners, with first-time buyers scrambling to secure deals before the rate hike.
It comes as the International Monetary Fund calls on the government to reconsider its strategy of tax cuts for highest earners.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to establish a state-owned energy company in his first year in office if elected Prime Minister.
And European leaders have accused Russia of sabotage after explosions around the Nord Stream pipelines caused gas to leak into the Baltic Sea.
Remember, you can get in touch the usual way, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or drop us a tweet at gbnews. So much to talk about this morning.
Yeah, indeed.
Let's start with our top story. Kwasi Kwarteng continuing to try and calm financial markets today amid market predictions that the Bank of England will have to raise interest rates to 6%.
Well, yesterday, the Chancellor met with city bosses and attempted to reassure them, saying that he was confident in the government's long-term strategy.
Well, today he'll meet with representatives of Wall Street after the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said she was monitoring developments in the UK.
Well, let's get some analysis now of the economic crisis with the Deputy Editor of the political newspaper CapEx, that's Alice Denby. Welcome. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Look, moves from the Chancellor to try and reassure, I suppose, the City of London, and now we're seeing New York as well. Is he being successful in that, or is the repetition of his continued argument no help?
I think what's really frustrating for people who believe there's both a kind of moral and an economic case for tax cuts is how badly this has been presented. It does feel like, while people may agree with the individual policies, corporation tax and the national insurance rise, they said they were going to do it. It seems like throwing in a couple of other things at the last minute, like, for example, removing the 45p tax rate, has really spooked people. It feels like this is a problem with the package as a whole rather than the individual policies that has sent the markets into meltdown.
And the suggestion over the weekend that there would be further tax cuts, even though there'd been a bad reaction to what had been announced on Friday, which I suppose has spooked it further.
Yes, Kwasi Kwarteng really needs to explain to people how he is going to pay for this. It seems like he's done half of the job. He's announced the tax cuts first without announcing the rest of what his plan is to actually pay for this.
Well, he says he's got a medium length plan that he's going to announce November the 23rd. Do you think he can wait that long?
I think things will calm down a bit over the next few days, but I think he really needs to get ahead of this and really reassure people that there is a plan here. I think it feels to me like the markets and I think the public are increasingly starting to feel that this package isn't credible. It reminds me a bit of sort of Jeremy Corbyn's policy platform in the 2019 election. People liked a lot of the individual ideas. Free broadband sounds great. They just didn't believe that he was competent to deliver it.
And when the Conservative Party's borrowing the same as Jeremy Corbyn promised he would, you can understand why people like Mel Stride, Conservative Party chairman of the Treasury Select Committee, has come out saying the party's economic reputation has been put in jeopardy. You say things might calm down over the next few days, and yet we're seeing mortgages, most of the new products being removed whilst they try and absorb and understand exactly what this means for the lenders, and a few products going back on the market at 5%. I mean, that's not going to feel like things are calming down for ordinary British people, is it?
No, and what the markets hate most of all is uncertainty, and I think it was the fact that Kwasi Kwarteng had these little surprises hidden in his mini budget and didn't set out a much broader package and as I say, how he was going to pay for it. And I think the real risk for Conservatives is exactly as you say. If it comes to the next election and people are poorer, it doesn't matter if they've keeping more of their income through tax cuts, if their mortgages have gone up by, thousands of pounds a month. That is the real risk.
Yeah, and politically, that's why some Conservative MPs are worried about the centre ground being completely vacated by the Conservative Party now. If Boris Johnson was still in power, you maybe wouldn't have heard Keir Starmer making that kind of speech that he did yesterday. But he's sensing that when it comes to issues like inequality and levelling up, that he can now move into that area because that mini budget that was announced by Kwasi Kwarteng kind of talked a lot about tax cuts for the rich, or that are going to benefit the rich more than the poor.
I think one thing that might reassure some Conservatives, I don't want to try and paint too rosy a picture, but one thing that might reassure them is that definitely I think the economic debate has moved firmly towards growth. You saw that in Keir Starmer's speech yesterday. He was talking very much about growth. So I think the Conservatives do have a story to tell on that. I think some of the presentation of how it's been spun as tax cuts for the rich rather than tax cuts to help the poorest with the cost of living is where they've really gone wrong.
And crucially, what he needs to prove is this credible plan is to reduce debt as a proportion of GDP. How can he prove that? How can he do that?
I think there is an argument that it makes sense to borrow to pay for the energy price cap, as you would for an emergency, for a wartime. I think there is, some economists would say, an argument for moving that debt into the medium term. I think it's the other, in fact, less significant measures like the 45p cut that he needs to explain how he's going to pay for. Some economists say that particular measure might, in fact, sort of pay for itself because you get more revenues when you're taxing the rich less. But I feel like he needs to, explain that a bit better.
Yeah. How much time has he got? Because this is all about, hang on, I've got a plan, stick with me. That's what he's saying to Conservative MPs, Conservative voters, the country, the markets. How long has he got?
I mean, the whole issue with this government is they know they're in a rush. They know they only have 18 months till the next election. I think that's why they took this kind of shock and awe approach at the mini budget, to sort of just get things done as quickly as possible and really make a statement. That's both their biggest challenge and their biggest advantage in a way that they are in such a hurry.
Well, it's all interesting. Alice Denby, thank you very much, Deputy Editor from CapX. I just want to ask you at home to let us know your thoughts this morning. Are you feeling worried? Are you trying to get a new mortgage? Are you trying to buy a new property? A few of you have been getting in touch this morning. Jerry saying our new Prime Minister is certainly levelling up the country. She's making the rich richer and the poor poorer.
Yeah. Nigel says, what happened to the reduction in VAT and abolition of the green levy? I don't remember her talking about or Kwasi Kwarteng talking about a reduction in VAT, but they are going to scrap the green levy, aren't they?
They are scrapping the green levy. Jay in Cambridgeshire says, to the vast majority of the UK population, the deposit required alone to buy a house is a life-changing amount of money. The idea of actually buying a house is a joke. I'm sure lots of people will share that view. Keep your thoughts coming in. We'll try and reflect as many of them as we can.
Yeah, let's get some more now on the last day of the Labour Party's conference. Sir Keir Starmer yesterday pledging to establish a publicly owned energy company to help promote growth in the UK.
Well, the Labour leader used a speech at his party's conference to accuse the Conservatives of crashing the pound, as he said Labour would create a fresh start for the UK.
Our political reporter Catherine Forster has the story.
As Keir Starmer breakfasted with his wife in Liverpool, he had reason to be cheerful. A YouGov poll gave Labour a huge 17% lead over the Conservatives, as financial jitters continued over Chancellor Kwarteng's package of tax cuts and borrowing. Starmer's leader's speech, in contrast to last year's overlong and underpowered offering, sent the hall to its feet over and over again, as Labour sensed power is possible. On the Conservatives, he was brutal.
The government has lost control of the British economy. And for what? Not for you, not for working people, for tax cuts for the richest 1% in our society. Don't forget, don't forgive. They used to lecture us about fixing the roof when the sun was shining. But take a look around Britain. They haven't just failed to fix the roof. They've ripped out the foundations, smashed through the windows, and now they've blown the doors off for good measure. Their record is appalling. The worst decade of growth in 2 centuries. Or, as the Chancellor puts it, a vicious cycle of stagnation.
Along with pledges of far more NHS doctors and nurses, he pledged 70% home ownership and had a bold plan for energy security.
So we will set up Great British Energy within the first year of a Labour government. Green and growth don't just go together. They're inseparable. The future wealth of this country is in our air, in our seas, in our skies. Britain should harness that wealth and share it with all. British power to the British people.
And finally,
we are the party of the centre ground. Once again, the political wing of the British people. Say it loud and believe it. Britain will deal with the cost of living crisis. Britain will get its future back. A country where aspiration is rewarded, where working people succeed, a force for good in the world, a clean energy superpower, a fairer, greener, more dynamic nation. This is my commitment to you, the national mission of the next Labour government. And together with the British people, we will do it. Thank you, Conference.
So echoes of Tony Blair, a figure for so long considered toxic after the Iraq War, but no more. Not everyone's happy within the Labour tent, especially on the left, those erstwhile supporters of Jeremy Corbyn. Remember him? Labour has been on quite a journey. But the mood is more energetic and optimistic than it's been for years, as Starmer drags the party back towards the centre and, he hopes, power. Catherine Forster, GB News.
So that's what happened yesterday. Let's look ahead to the final day of Labour's party conference today with our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who joins us live from Liverpool. Morning, Tom. How are you feeling? We hear you were out last night with one certain Shadow Health Secretary.
Yes, always Tuesday night at conference is one of those largest nights, and yesterday was no exception, mainly focusing on a party hosted by the Daily Mirror newspaper, a host of shadow cabinet members singing karaoke, Keir Starmer turning up for a speech, and everyone having rather a good time. And it does feel that the Labour Party has had a good time over the last 4 days, that this has been a conference that has gone fairly well without much of a hitch for the Labour Party leadership. They needed to do a few things over these 4 days. They needed to present themselves as a government in waiting, moving beyond the carping from the sidelines opposition movement that sometimes they felt like over these last 12 years, and present themselves as something more credible, something more government-like. And that is precisely what the speeches, particularly of the Shadow Chancellor and the Leader of the Opposition, were designed to do, to try and present this as a party that, yes, speaks about inequality, that, yes, speaks about those traditional Labour Party messages, that it wants to raise taxes and the rest of it, but also speaks to a more centre ground pitch, that it doesn't want to, for example, reverse some of these tax cuts that have just come in on the lower paid, that it also wants to promote a greater sense of fiscal discipline. Those are words that we haven't heard from the Labour Party for quite some time. But overall, on the floor of the conference, we felt more of a united party than we have for quite some time here at the Labour Party conference. It doesn't take that much of a long memory to remember last year when Sir Keir Starmer's speech was heckled, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but a host of times during his speech. He had to stop as members of his own party shouted at him from the conference floor. Similarly, there were many different moments of constitutional wrangling over votes and battles at that conference as well. This year, it's been a very different state of affairs, and potentially that's why last night at the Mirror Party so many shadow cabinet members were so relaxed and indeed so happy, to the very point that the Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting started singing Angels by Robbie Williams, but changing one crucial lyric. He said, "I'm loving Starmer" instead.
Seen it all now. Never mind the conference floor, it's the dance floor at conference where it's at. Tom, I believe I have it on reliable authority. You were obviously in a professional capacity there until something after 3 in the morning. Well done you for being up and with it at 7:15. But look, somebody who wasn't invited last night to that party, Rupa Hook, disgraced herself with the comments she made on a fringe event on Monday. She has since apologised unreservedly for them, but will that do enough for her to be re-accepted into the party?
Yes, it was the one hitch of this Labour Party conference. Things had gone relatively smoothly for the Labour leadership, save for this really off-colour remark that came on Monday from Rupa Hook, saying that Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, doesn't sound like a black man when you hear him on the radio. I mean, the most remarkable statement that particularly challenging for the Labour Party. At first, when challenged about these comments, Rupa Hook stood by them. It wasn't until the Conservative Party demanded her suspension, the chairman of the Conservative Party writing to the chairman of the Labour Party with such a demand, and a few hours later a suspension came about, and only then a reverse ferret and an apology. We're not expecting Rupa Hook to be readmitted to the Labour Party any time soon, because there will be a process. She has lost the whip as things stand, but potentially this apology, having come a few hours after the news broke, might well mean that that whip does come back in the fullness of time.
And generally, Tom, at the conference, has the way Keir Starmer's dealt with it, which was pretty quick, has that been welcomed?
Yes, it was fairly quick. The wound was cauterised, although it was a story that percolated for a couple of hours. And I think one of the particular challenges for the Labour Party here is the initial response of Rupa Hook, whereby she stood by those comments. And it wasn't until the announcement of the suspension came about that there was an apology that came about. That might be a little bit tricky, but overall, a fairly quick response from the Labour Party, not wanting this particular unfortunate event to overshadow what was, in the round, a fairly successful conference.
Good stuff, Tom. Thanks very much indeed. With the time at 7:17, we're going to bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour.
Kemi Badenoch has set her sights on US investment in her first overseas visit to New York as Trade Secretary. The visit will see her attempt to boost trade links between the countries. It comes just days after the PM admitted that a post-Brexit free trade deal with the US may remain out of reach for a few years to come.
People are being urged to have flu and COVID vaccines as experts become increasingly worried about a bad flu spike this winter. Officials at the UK Health Security Agency warn there'll be lower levels of natural immunity to flu this year, following a series of winters when people socialise less during the pandemic. Around 33 million people in England will be eligible for a free flu vaccine this year.
Royal Mail will strike a further 19 times in the next 2 months as talks break down over pay and conditions. The Communication Workers Union says the action in October and November will run over peak mail periods such as Black Friday and the Christmas build-up.
Right, lots of anxiety at the moment if you are trying to buy a house or you're rushing to secure a mortgage before a predicted rise in interest rates.
Yeah, it comes after the Bank of England said on Monday it would not hesitate to hike rates after the pound hit record lows.
But with some lenders now clawing back mortgage deals for new customers, how easy will it really be to buy a new property? Alice Porter has been finding out.
Serena is a 24-year-old charity worker hoping to buy her first property. She's urgently trying to secure a mortgage before interest rates increase even further.
My mortgage broker actually proactively called me this morning saying that she'd been advising all of her clients to get on the ladder now and just get in there, get a mortgage agreement, because interest rates are only going to go up and property prices are only going to go up, and the last thing I want to do is make a rod for my own back and wait too long and everything's much more expensive than it is now.
So we've recently heard that some mortgage deals are being withdrawn by mortgage providers, by building societies. Is that making you feel quite panicked about your decision?
I'd rather have the time to explore my options a bit more, because right now I am restricted in that I can pretty much only get a 1-bed, and I was looking at, if I wait a couple of months I could maybe save up a little bit more and get a 2-bed, but now that option's just been completely taken away.
But not everyone can easily exchange on properties at the moment. For the hundreds and thousands of people who own properties with unsafe cladding, like Paul Afshar, they're unable to sell their homes amid spiralling costs.
In 2007, when I bought my flat, the interest on my mortgage rate was 3.5%. As of September, it's now well over 5%, and that's only going to keep going up. A big part of the problem was that I got a bad deal on my mortgage originally because I was a first-time buyer and I was buying through the government shared ownership scheme. And that bad deal, unfortunately, is coming back to haunt me with the very real and very scary prospect of spiralling costs thanks to continued interest rate rises.
Some economists have predicted that the Bank of England will raise interest rates to 5.8% by spring, which will make it less attractive to buy a new property. At the same time,
today we have cut stamp duty.
The Chancellor's announcement that stamp duty is being cut shows that the government is trying to fuel the housing market. The question is, will it benefit people if they can't afford the mortgage repayments in the first place? But estate agents are calling for calm after a turbulent few days and say even with the increases, interest rates are still low.
The biggest problems people had during Brexit times, financial crisis times and so on, was they couldn't afford to buy properties. It was a case of lenders weren't lending. So now it's a case of lenders are still lending, interest rates are still low. There is obviously concern with the market or where the market's heading, but ultimately, if something's at the right price, buyers should be buying.
For many buyers, their conundrum now is whether to fix their interest rates or wait to see if the forecasts are wrong. Alice Porter, GB News.
Well, for more, let's speak to property buying agent Emma Filders. Emma, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
First of all, how worried are you about the property market?
Well, it's an interesting time for buyers. Obviously, lots of people are very concerned about what is happening in the news. You wake up every day and there's something sensational happening. Mortgage rates, nobody knows what's happening. If you're trying to buy a property right now, it's a very scary time. What you were promised and what you now could get, you don't know until your bank comes online and you can see what your new rate will be, which I suspect will be a lot higher than what you first anticipated.
Well, let's start with first-time buyers. These are people who, thought on the face of it they were getting this wonderful opportunity to get on the property ladder without stamp duty up to 400,000 or something thereabouts. And the next thing you understand, interest rates are going to be rising, which has the knock-on mortgage effects. And as you were, I'm going to call you Eamonn then, as Paul was so perfectly expressing, it's almost just absorbed into that and has no effect. So what does it mean for first-time buyers? What's your advice to people who want to get on the property ladder today?
It's a horrible time for first-time buyers. I advise quite a few first-time buyers, and they're really sort of conflicted about they have waited so long to get onto the property ladder, and they were poised to do it, and now they're in a position where they have to question whether they can afford to do it. If you have got an offer and you can move and you can ride out this moment in time, you should maybe continue to do it. However, for some people, they just can't afford to do it. It's not realistic. This is all sort of in line with the cost of living crisis. Everything is more expensive. So what your budget was before and now is strained.
And if you want to sell?
Well, it's difficult. I suspect lots of people won't put their property on the market if this continues, if it gets worse and worse, because they just know people won't pay the same prices as they were during the pandemic. It's very difficult if your neighbour got X and then 6 months later you're being told you're going to get Y, which is significantly
But what's
less.
the effect of that, though? Because that reduces supply, which drives up price. But you would assume, you know, and I've been reading some reports that people are taking their houses off the market because there's some suggestion property prices could drop by as much as 15%. So which is it?
Well, I mean, we don't know if it's going to drop that far at the moment. It really depends if it does go to 6%, and that would be next year. But what is really clear is there is a lack of confidence everywhere. So nobody knows what's going to happen. And when there's no confidence, it sort of stalls. Everything stalls. And everyone is anxious around it, and nobody wants to overspend.
Yeah, and staying and renting instead of buying may not necessarily be a cost-saving measure, given if interest rates are rising, then landlords will have to put up their rent to cover their mortgage costs.
Yeah, I mean, rents went up 3.4% in August, from memory. And I mean, the amount you pay for rent now is quite scary, especially if you're in London. I deal mainly with the London market, and I'm finding it is crazy what you will spend. So you're not going to save any money for a deposit if you're in rented. I mean, if you can stay at mum and dad's, OK, maybe you can save some money. But for many, all of their money will go on rent. They won't be able to save for a deposit. And meanwhile, you know, the cost of borrowing is going up.
What would your advice be to somebody who's thinking, OK, I'm going to try and cash in now before any possible crash, sell my property, move into rental, albeit expensive, but short-term, in the hope that you can then buy chain-free, but at a lower price at some point in the future?
Well, there will be people who will do that. Yeah. If, you know, there are people who all still want to move. Lots of people are obviously still looking for houses. That sort of grass is always greener. So they'll take a view on it. And I think if you sell now, you might have that opportunity that prices will dip and you'll be able to come in. But then your supply might be limited on what you can choose. But I think with all the crisis that's going on, we always have to remember it does come back. It's just when it comes back and how long it takes. And that's the more important question. Because if inflation is higher for longer, it means borrowing is obviously more expensive for longer. And that has a knock-on effect.
Yeah. Really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, do let us know if at home you're affected by any of these issues, your experiences. We'd love to share them, any case studies as well, particularly if you've been house hunting, if you've been desperate, seeing the supply shrinking, or if you've been trying to sell your house and seeing viewings decrease. Let us know your stories this morning.
And actually, just very quickly, Betty's got in touch with us. Morning, Betty, who says, we bought our first house towards the end of 1970 at 7% interest rate. Then it rose to 15. Gosh. While at home with my children, I did childminding and worked 2 nights a week, all just to make ends meet. We were also dealing with 23% inflation rate. Now, the analysts are saying that, OK, 6% is not as high as 23%, 15% as it was back then. But the difference between then and now is that there was more disposable income now, they're saying. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
So
the situation's
today
compared to then,
exactly.
although it was difficult then.
Exactly, and there's a lot of unsecured borrowing, credit cards, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's what people are used to now compared to the 1970s. So actually, there's not much room for manoeuvre. 6% is more like 14% back in the 70s. That's the argument, anyway.
Stay with us. Coming up, we'll be going through the big sports of the day, including Scotland's Nation League promotion.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 7:29. Still to come on today's programme. 7:45. Flight fares for the upcoming October half term go up. We'll find out how you can make your money go further when booking a holiday. And pop star, superstar Shakira, remember her, could face an 8-year prison sentence and a €24 million fine in Spain. Also, showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield will tell us why at 8:20. Remember, you can join in any of the conversations we're having this morning about interest rates, about house buying, about the Labour Party conference, also what Russia are up to as well. You can get in touch with us in the usual way, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or drop us a tweet at gbviews. Let's bring you up to date with all the latest sports this morning. We're joined as ever by Paul Coit. Paul, morning to you.
Morning.
Scotland.
Yeah,
oh,
that's
good
about
at
all
football.
we've got. It's Scotland. I don't know if it's like a consolation. It's almost like the consolation prize that they've managed to win. They played Ukraine and went to Poland because obviously Ukraine aren't playing at home, so it was a home tie for Ukraine in the Nations League, and it was 0-0, which doesn't sound like the greatest game and doesn't sound like, oh my goodness, we're going to be opening with talking about Scotland and Ukraine. But it is hugely important for Scotland because they've moved up a tier now in the Nations League. It's a really hard game to play against. The Ukraine, put it in some sort of context, knocked them out of the World Cup. Yeah. So when we look back in June, Ukraine was one of the qualifying games. Ukraine won it and then ended up losing to Wales, who then ended up getting to Qatar. Whereas Scotland, if only they'd done this back in June. So they beat them at Hampden and then they go over to Poland to play them. And just to get a draw makes them basically move up to the Group A part of the Nations League, which means that they would get a playoff place into the Euro. It really does start getting complicated. Yeah. They get a playoff place into the Euros, which is coming up. Also, they get seeded better, so that suits them. But more importantly, probably for many Scottish football fans, is that they now are above England when it comes to the Nations League.
And the riposte will be Nations League.
That's what one will say, Nations League. Are we bothered about the Nations League? But as a nation, it does help them in qualification for the Euros, but it's not the World Cup, and that's what they would have really wanted. So, you take it for what it is. It's still a good result. And they had so many injuries. So they're like 10 changes since the last game. So they brought in a load of new players. They've got a centre-back that's making his debut that's playing there, and I mean, it talk about baptism of fire, and it was just wave after wave after wave, but they managed to keep Ukraine out, and Ukraine had a much better side and probably should have won. So, for what it's worth, it's a good result for Scotland.
It's a good result for Scotland.
Looking forward, who knows? I think Steve Clarke, the Scotland manager, said I think it's about the small praises. That's what he said.
You're doing the accent
small
as well.
Praises. Yeah, I can always do it because you're very dour, Scots. You never see him with a smile on his face, but it's about the small prizes. So it's turning into. We were talking on the radio this morning. It's almost like it's like the TV show 3, 2, 1. You can't understand what the result is going to be, where it ends up going, and it's also they managed to pick up.
From now on, you have to do the accent of whoever you're quoting.
You know what? You wait for the World Cup. It's going to be horrendous. I'll be thrown off the air in about 10 minutes.
Looking at this, the average Premier League player's net income will rise by about 240 grand a year after the government's tax and national insurance cuts.
It works very well for the football players. They're very happy about it, I'd imagine. So the tax and national insurance cuts. So the average league, a Premier League player, about 4 million a year. This is an average for a player. So these are some players in the Premier League that you wouldn't be too familiar with. The average is about 4 million.
These are the people you've not heard of.
Yeah. This is, I mean, you've got the real big earners are earning much more than this. So we're talking about 75k a week. It's not bad, is it?
Yeah.
And also it's the only job that anybody ever refers to in weeks' wages because it just sounds bigger.
Yeah.
So it works out that it's going to cut them by about 204. They're going to end up 240k better off by
where do you stand on that when people say it's outrageous, it's obscene, it's disgusting?
It's market value. I mean, I look at it and think, how can anybody earn that much for playing football? But you can say, I mean, it started with looking at film stars years ago, and they're saying, well, how could they earn that money? Because it's worth it to the company, worth it to the film company, and therefore it's also worth it for the money that's coming into football clubs. So you have to pay that sort of money. I don't blame the players, because if you're a player, you think, well, this is fantastic, this is the money I'm going to earn. It's obscene money, but it's just the way
what
things
people are paying for their subscriptions to BT.
You can't compare it to a regular job and say, well, they should be earning just like the old days. Times have changed, and there's so much money coming into the game, someone else would pay it. So it's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, and just very quickly, King Charles, first runner as monarch, has been greeted with jubilation within racing.
Educator is the name of the horse. It's Educator. So it's the Queen's colours, or see, look, I'm going to make the mistake.
King's colours. It's all right. I still call him Prince Charles.
Do you really?
Prince Charles, King Charles. Yeah.
See, in this sort of job, we've got to try and remember King Charles III colours.
King Charles III.
So it runs at Salisbury tomorrow. Tom Marquand is going to be the jockey on this horse. See, the King not quite as enthusiastic on horse racing as the Queen was, because the Queen, was one of the world's top owners. And absolutely loved it. She would phone up trainers later on in the evening and saying, what's the form, because she absolutely loved it. Whereas we've
Charles
got exactly, not so much.
Yeah.
But the Queen Consort is very much into racing, so it's something that she's going to be more involved in than he is.
Yeah, he'll still know one end of a horse from another, won't he? The royal family is connected generally. He's on the fringes of it, isn't he?
I think he knows one end of a horse. And he's ridden in races. When he was younger, he actually did ride in a few.
Really?
But the love is not quite as much there as his mother. But then again, there's not many people that did love racing as much as the Queen did.
Paul, thank you very much for that.
Pleasure.
Cheers, thank you. Sports broadcaster Paul Coit there. After the break, we'll be going through the papers with David Mellor and Claire Muldoon. As ever, if you want to join in the conversation, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll see you in a bit.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's time to go through the papers. We're joined this morning by the broadcaster Claire Muldoon and former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor. Is that making you giggle?
Just because you said Muldoon.
Muldoon.
Continuing theme of dodgy Scottish accent.
There has been an outbreak of that during the advert break there. David, please, again.
This is not Scotland's Got Talent here. Can I just say, for all our viewers and listeners, the three of these guys look like or sound like Mrs. Doubtfire. It's horrendous.
Hello there. David, let's get serious, shall we? We did need a little bit of levity because the news is all doom and gloom with Muldoon. But David, let's start with the tax cuts. Times page 6, and it's these, Kwarteng is sticking to his guns.
Well, I mean, he says it's the right choice. Well, he has to, doesn't he? But the reality is, and by the way, just in case anyone thinks we're being smart after the event, I remember saying at the time that this was first announced that it's one thing to cut taxes because you've cut public expenditure, which is what the Thatcher government did, but it's quite another to increase public expenditure and then increase it again and then increase it further through tax cuts. So we're borrowing money and having to pay interest on it in order to give people tax cuts. That doesn't make sense.
You're saying fiscally not the right choice. What about politically? How does that
politically
sound?
It's gone down like a lead balloon because, of course, everybody knows that, let's take the 45p tax rate. 40 to 45p raises almost nothing. It's simply a way of stopping people getting above themselves and earning more money than they should in the eyes of certain people in politics. But to appear to be giving the rich a tax break while at the same time pushing people's mortgages up and all the rest of it. Look, I don't like to sound gloomy because I'm essentially a happy chap,
He is a very happy chap. And
with your dodgy Scottish accent.
We have had some emails saying, oh, goodness, it's all doom and gloom. But do you
this
know,
is
people don't want to hear
serious.
the truth sometimes.
This is serious. And I think this is as bad a hole as any government has dug itself into for a very long time.
Well, that's interesting.
And the other...
As Dennis Healey memorably said, when you're in a hole, stop digging. So come on, Kwasi, come on, Prime Minister, stop digging.
And this is nothing against being anti-Liz Truss or anti-Kwasi Kwarteng. We are basically reporting the facts. And that is the fiscal fact. And, people need to start realising that you can't just blankly support things right, left and centre, metaphorically and literally, without actually understanding what's going on.
The
on
market.
a serious point, I mean, we touched on this in the last paper review about Kwasi Kwarteng's credentials. Yes, he's a very green minister and a very, very experienced job, but his CV is extraordinary.
Yes, he worked for Crispin Odey, who knows how to bet against the pound. Well, he did, and he shorted against
the pound, made a fortune on
and
Friday.
Still is doing so,
suggestion of
insider trading.
I would add. However, he's, Cambridge degree, Cambridge PhD. He's got which American, I don't know if it's Harvard or one of those. I mean, he's highly qualified and experienced. So he's not stupid.
No, nobody's suggesting that. I think he's extremely well qualified. But you see, even well qualified people get things wrong. And I think that there's an element of sort of, like an act of religious observance. We believe in low taxes, so when we get a chance, we're going to cut taxes. Well, it doesn't always work, and they proved it.
And he was on University Challenge.
Yeah,
so was I.
And so were you.
So was I. Not one of the more successful ventures. Well, actually, we won. I tell you the honest truth. We won the rehearsal. Against Dundee
right, that means you didn't win it then.
He then went out and had several drinks to celebrate prematurely our victory and then lost.
Well, serves you right, some might say.
Oh, you've started and now I'll finish.
Yeah, speaking of having lots of drinks, Labour conference, Claire, at Daily Mail, page 10, we were talking to Tom Harwood, looking pretty good considering he was at a
Sounding a bit croaky, though.
event till past 3 when we were getting up this morning. Anyway, so what have they said? This is all actually in relation to comments being made by Rupa Hook on Monday at a Fringe event. What did she say, and what has been the response of the Labour Party?
So Rupa Hook was a Labour MP before the whip was suspended from her for making racial remarks. There's no beating about the bush. She actually said that Kwasi Kwarteng, you wouldn't think he was black, sounding the way he was, but considering of what he's done in his job as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Now, the Labour Party, for me, seems to be the Labour of inclusivity, they keep saying, of diversity, they keep saying, and they want to keep people so in together. And yet, the minute that they think that someone should be behaving in certain ways, they come down on them. It's almost as if they're setting people up to fail. And that's not what a political party should be doing. They should
Is that Labour, though, or is that Rupa Hook?
Well, she's part of the Labour Party. Where does the Venn diagram split? So she's now sitting as an independent. Yeah. But I would say that Labour has a constitutional, institutional, inbuilt diversity issue, because, as I said in the previous paper review, I think they like to other. I think they like to keep everybody in, and you can toe the line. They can actually be completely in control of them until one of them perhaps moves or thinks in a separate way, and then they're ousted. So it's not very good for Starmer, I don't think, having this on his doorstep. He said to deal with the Corbyn slur of anti-Semitism. He said to deal with the unions. He said to deal with, his own sense of identity. Who is he? Is he Tony Blair? I don't know. Is he John Smith? I don't know.
He's had to deal with...
Well, he's certainly not John Smith.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's interesting about him is that, he was enjoying himself, and why wouldn't he? After all, he's been through. Starmer was enjoying himself. But last year he was booed at the Labour Party conference. And so the Labour Party is a fairly unpredictable nag. You leap on it and it seems to be giving you a good ride round the course, and suddenly it'll chuck you off.
But they've had years to get their act together. They've had years in opposition, and yet I've not heard anything in terms of what they would do and in terms of what the Conservatives are doing and what they wouldn't do or what they would do.
I mean, they're going to reimpose the 45% rate and then spend it all on NHS staff. I mean, talk about clichés. I mean, that is not politics. That is just a sort of gut reaction. Anyone who thinks that the problems of the NHS will be solved by just chucking a lot more money at staff, it's not true. The problems of the NHS are far more complicated.
It's almost as if with the same remark of the Bank of England and quantitative easing, just making more money and chucking it back into the economy. It's the same thing.
You've already touched on it, David. Page 19 in the Mail, mortgage crisis. If people's interest rates are going up and their homes are at risk, well, game over for the Tories?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? And it's what Sarah Vine said. Don't always agree with Sarah Vine, but she writes well and she's a controversialist. And the headline says it all: put people's homes at risk, and it's game over for the Tories. I mean, the reality is that the Tory party has traditionally been the party of home ownership. It's traditionally been the party that, very few people go to school and think, I'm going to work hard and I can be a tenant.
Yeah.
And so basically, if indeed they lose control of the mortgage situation, you see, it really doesn't matter at this stage what the public think of what Kwasi Kwarteng did. What matters is what the people who lend the money think. And what they've shown is, first of all, they've driven up the cost of government borrowing, 1% up to 5%. And of course, that will make the cost of servicing government's debts one of the biggest items of public expenditure. And forget about the health service, you've got to pay off the bankers.
Is that not the case in America? Or am I...
Yeah, it's the case, but we are paying... This is one of the amusing facts in the papers today. We are paying more interest than Greece or Italy.
Italy, yeah.
Come on.
To who? To the IMF?
Yeah.
And you're right, the attack from the IMF, almost unprecedented. I mean, we are a major shareholder in the IMF. And the danger is that if in the international markets and those who determine things like international interest rates, the Tory government looks as though it's lost the plot, that's going to be very serious. And we come back to Sarah Vine's point. people who own their own homes have to pay mortgages. I can remember what it was like when mortgages were at a ridiculous level, and I hoped we'd never see that again. However, it's back.
But even at that ridiculous level, there was robustness in the ability to borrow from banks because they seemed to be more mature in terms of when they were giving the loans to people. So I think when you harken back to the mid-70s and we had runaway inflation then, people's housing cost wasn't as big as it is now. Banks are lending, 3, 4, 5 times an income. I mean, that's unsustainable. If the job goes, then that's it, gone. And yet you're fighting high interest rates and still trying to live against a time when the cost of a house was much, much less than it is now, even relatively.
And if everything's going up, the cost of your energy, the cost of your mortgage,
food.
Doesn't matter.
Today it's
got
food.
A penny off the income tax. It doesn't matter.
Figures out on inflation this morning show that the main driver is food of inflation.
Yeah, I bet.
Fueled by transport costs.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
David, thank you. Thank you very much, Claire.
Yes,
for more in the next
We'll
hour.
do more on Russia, the situation with with the pipelines, and indeed people trying to get away from that mobilisation. But for now, thank you both very much.
Yeah, and by the way, the pound dipped a little bit overnight. Currently $1, 106 to the pound at the moment. So it's dipped slightly overnight, probably with that warning from the IMF, one would have thought, spooking the markets again. But it is 7:49. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening this morning.
The Chancellor will reportedly meet investment bankers today as he attempts to reassure markets about his economic plans. Kwasi Kwarteng insists he's confident his tax-cutting strategy will deliver the promised economic growth.
The Labour conference draws to a close today as the party positions itself as ready for government. Final speeches today include plans for GPs in England to give face-to-face appointments to every patient and a pledge for every primary school child to have access to a breakfast club.
The Natural History Museum and Ukrainian scientists have completed research to try and save some of Kyiv's historic artworks. The researchers joined forces to try and establish the cause of damage to some medieval murals after they developed dark spots and began to flake away.
Right, seems like a weird time to be talking about holidays, given the cost of living crisis. But if you're looking for an October half-term getaway, you might want to check flight prices before you click commit.
Yes, that's because of rising fuel costs, demand for travel and airport passenger caps. A consumer group which has now found return tickets have risen by around £124 per person.
The good news is there are some things we can do to keep costs down, and here to tell us what they are is Nikki Kelvin, head of the Points Guy UK. Good morning to you, Nikki.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you really take a holiday in these times? How much does the pound get you in North Korea?
I've actually been to North Korea, although that was a long time ago, and but that's a story for another day. There are still ways to get a cheap holiday. Times are getting tougher and tougher. As you just said, this Which survey is showing that flight prices are ever increasing. I think 42% up on the same time last year. I think that's what the stat was. And October half-term is looking particularly bad because people, again, are still wanting to get away. It was a difficult summer. Passenger caps meant flights were cancelled, prices were driven up, demand is still high and supply is still low, with airlines and airports struggling still to really staff up properly. But amongst all this gloom, there are some good things. There are some good options. And I've been working hard looking at ways to find cheap flights, and there are deals to be had even in October half-term.
OK, so tell us what deals you've unearthed and how people can find them.
OK, so my top tip is to use a service like Google Flights. I think the key in these times is to be able to be flexible with your departure point as much as you can, as flexible with your destination as you can. People who are restricted to October half-term obviously have to work within those dates, but what I found was if you're trying to search from the Saturday to Saturday or Saturday to Sunday, that's where you're going to struggle. Prices are much higher than usual. But if you look at a trip from Sunday to Friday or Sunday to Saturday or Monday to Saturday, I was finding prices to places like Barcelona, destination Turkey, Lisbon, Madrid for about £100 return in that period, which is really good because you're seeing flights to places like Tenerife for £300-400, which is quite eye-watering. You also need to look at these destinations and see how far your pound goes, because obviously with the weakening currency is causing its own issues.
Yeah, well, that was where I was going to go. So if you're lucky enough to have found a good deal on a flight and you're able to tally it up with half-time and everything else, where are the destinations where the pound is going to get you the most for your bang for your pound?
Yeah. Not America.
Yeah, OK, not the States.
No. The euro at the moment, you get 1.11 this morning, 1.11 to the pound.
Yeah.
In euro.
So really what we're looking for now is destinations where it's actually cheap on the ground. So you can't rely on currency anymore to help you. So the destinations we've identified that are still cheap when you're spending your pounds is Turkey, Bulgaria. These are places where there's still pretty decent weather at this time of year. Portugal's another one. And so those kind of destinations, Bulgaria and Turkey are the ones that were highlighted the most, where you could probably still grab some good weather even in October or on the beaches there. And that's where, you're going out for a meal for two, bottle of wine around the 20 to 25 pound mark, comparing that to somewhere that is very expensive, for example, Iceland, where the same sort of basket of things in a restaurant would cost you over £100. So you're paying a fifth of the price to go to those cheaper places still, even with today's exchange rates.
What advice would you give to a family who perhaps say they're living in somewhere like Kent, they can see a good deal from Bristol Airport or from Birmingham Airport? When you factor in the cost of fuel, is it still a saving to travel a long way to an airport, or are you better off just going to your nearest one with the cost of fuel at the moment?
It's not just the cost of fuel, it's also the cost of public transport, because you could decide to hop on a train, but that can be
cab or bus or whatever. Yeah.
Eye-wateringly expensive, all of these things. So you're really going to have to weigh these things up. Look at the airports around you, see what the price difference is between those airports and heading to somewhere else, like going from Birmingham to Bristol or whatever it is. In every situation, it's going to be different, but you do need to be open, flexible if you're really trying to get a good deal.
Good advice.
Yeah, Nikki, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate your time this morning. Nikki Kelvin there with that travel advice. GBViews at gbnews.uk if you want to feedback to us on
lots coming in. I just want to read a few of these. B says the mortgage rate's been low for a while now. I remember September 1988 when it reached 17% and it was tough, but everyone managed. Not sure everyone did, Now we haven't got a mortgage. Hopefully we will benefit from the savings percentage rate. Well, that's an interesting point. A lot of people complaining they're not passing on these interest rate rises to their savings account. And I had a look at mine the other day. It's still something like 0.4% interest on my savings account.
But even if they did, the savings would be eroded by inflation anyway. Wow. So either way, so even if they did, it wouldn't matter.
Debs, I survived 17% rates and resulting house price crash during his government. Oh, that's referring to David Mellor. The dollar is strong because of high US rates. Most currencies are behaving the same. I'll tell you what, the ruble's not. The Russian ruble's doing better than the pound at the moment. Linda, people have been griping about their mortgages going up. Have they thought about pensioners who rely on their savings and have had to cope with unbelievably low interest rates for 15 years? Lots of interesting points there. I think there's a particular demographic coming through there, isn't there?
Yeah.
People who survived the 70s and have no mortgages now. But it's tough out there.
It is tough. It's tough for all of us. It is 7:55. Stay with us. We'll have more on the Chancellor's attempts to hold on to his economic plan and credibility after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A bright and breezy day for many of us. Further scattered showers to come, especially around eastern and western coasts. But in between the showers, there will be some sunshine. The more prolonged rain that we saw yesterday in the southwest, now pushing away. These weather fronts responsible for that. And low pressure still close by. Isabel's a bit more spaced out, so the wind not quite as brisk, but it is still fairly breezy out there, especially in the north and down the east coast. That breeze bringing further showers to northern Scotland into southeast Scotland, as well as parts of eastern England. Northern Isle of Wales and the southwest seeing showers as well. One or two popping up further away as well, but away from the showers, some sunny spells, and out of the wind, a little bit warmer compared with yesterday. 15, 16, perhaps 17 Celsius in some favoured spots. Into the evening, some more prolonged rain topples in from the North Sea quite quickly across eastern Scotland and then into northern England, the Midlands, as well as eventually southern parts of England and South Wales. It turns more showery as it moves south, but there will be some heavy bursts associated with that. Away from there, further showers to come into the north, but clear spells in between. And temperatures not falling quite as far. We're looking at mid to high single figures generally. So a fairly bright start to Thursday. Some sunshine in places once the showery rain has moved away from the south. But further showers arrive, especially for northern England and eastern Scotland. Those showers coming in on a northeasterly breeze. And away from the showers, there will be some sunshine, but of course that northeasterly is going to make it feel cool across parts of eastern Scotland and northeast England. In the south, I think 16 or 17 Celsius out of the wind, feeling pleasant enough. However, on Friday, some heavy rain arrives from the west. That will be prolonged in the west during the morning, pushing into the east by the afternoon, accompanied by strong winds, bright spells and showers on Saturday.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
Helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Interest rates could rise to 6% as opposition to the Chancellor's mini-budget continues to grow.
A very good morning to you. It is 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 28th of September. This is the 28th of September already. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins. Here's what is news this Wednesday morning.
Financial markets are predicting interest rates will rise to 6% amid continued economic turmoil. The increase will affect millions of homeowners, with first-time buyers scrambling to secure deals before the rate hike.
It comes as the International Monetary Fund calls on the government to reconsider its strategy of tax cuts for the highest earners.
The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has pledged to establish a state-owned energy company in his first year in office if he's elected as Prime Minister.
And European leaders have accused Russia of sabotage after a series of explosions that caused the Nord Stream pipelines to leak gas into the Baltic Sea.
And we're wanting you to get in touch in the usual way. As always, GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBnews and be part of the conversation. Well, to our top story this morning, and the Chancellor is continuing to try and calm financial markets amid predictions that the Bank of England will have to raise interest rates to 6%.
Yeah, that said, the pound is buying 106 against the dollar this morning, so it dipped slightly overnight with that IMF warning. Yesterday, the Chancellor met with city bosses and attempted to reassure them, saying that he was confident in the government's long-term strategy.
Well, earlier we asked the chief economist at investment bank Panmure Gordon, Simon French, about the cost of this new mini budget on the public.
That have come out in support of this project are not the most credible voices in financial markets. And a lot of the, if you like, the grown-ups, the Bank of England,
What kind of voices? When you say those voices that aren't trusted, what kind of voices?
Well, you're talking about, you know, whatever one's view of Brexit over the last 6 years, the economists that have supported Brexit in 2016 promised a version of Brexit that hasn't crystallised. So when they're now talking about this plan for growth raising the UK's trend growth, you might want to give the government the benefit of the doubt, you might want to give those voices the benefit of the doubt, but you're also looking at the last 6 years and what was promised and what was delivered as being quite diametrically opposite and saying, how credible is that? It all comes back to credibility. If you can boost that credibility, the markets will give you the benefit of the doubt. If you don't have it, they'll behave like they have in recent weeks.
And where are gilt yields looking this morning? Because in many ways, I'm told the gilt yields are almost more of the story than sterling. And, you know, average Joe can understand sterling because we all deal in currency. But gilt yields is where traditionally we were on safe ground in this country, and they're all over the place.
That's right. So this is the price or the interest rate at which the government can borrow. And for many of the last few years, it's been hovering around 1-2%. 5 to 6% is currently the interest rate. What that means is that passes through pretty quickly, pretty instantaneously to the mortgage market. Now, there are 80% of mortgage holders who are on a fixed rate deal, but it's as those fixed rate deals come to an end, and it's about 1/3 households per quarter, so about 1.2 million per year, whose deals come to an end. They have to go back into the market to try and find a new deal. They could have been securing it back in January at 1.5%, maybe 2%. They're now looking at 5 to 6%. That is thousands of pounds increase in the mortgage market as a direct result of those gilt prices you mentioned.
Yeah, and this warning as well from the IMF, essentially telling the government that this is going to increase inequality, that the government needs to rethink this. How will the markets feel about that?
Well, I'm not sure it's the IMF's role, the International Monetary Fund, to be talking about inequality. That is a much more of a political issue. But the economics behind what they're trying to say, which is, you know, a lot of the, if you like, the institutional credibility we've just spoken about isn't there, is a salient warning. And whether you believe the International Monetary Fund have a good record, they are listened to by institutional investors. There is a signal provided there, which means people sat in Washington, Berlin, Beijing, thinking about allocating capital to the UK, they see warnings like that, and they're less likely to do it as a result.
Simon French there, economist, giving us his thoughts on the current state of the markets.
Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to establish a publicly owned energy company to try and help promote growth in the UK.
The Labour leader used a speech at his party's conference to accuse the Conservatives of crashing the pound, as he said Labour would create a fresh start for the UK.
Well, here's our political reporter Catherine Forster's analysis.
As Keir Starmer breakfasted with his wife in Liverpool, he had reason to be cheerful. A YouGov poll gave Labour a huge 17% lead over the Conservatives, as financial jitters continued over Chancellor Kwarteng's package of tax cuts and borrowing. Starmer's leader's speech, in contrast to last year's overlong and underpowered offering, sent the hall to its feet over and over again, as Labour sensed power is possible. On the Conservatives, he was brutal.
The government has lost control of the British economy. And for what? Not for you, not for working people, for tax cuts for the richest 1% in our society. Don't forget, don't forgive. They used to lecture us about fixing the roof when the sun was shining. But take a look around Britain. They haven't just failed to fix the roof. They've ripped out the foundations, smashed through the windows, and now they've blown the doors off for good measure. Their record is appalling. The worst decade of growth in 2 centuries. Or, as the Chancellor puts it, a vicious cycle of stagnation.
Along with pledges of far more NHS doctors and nurses, he pledged 70% home ownership and had a bold plan for energy security.
So we will set up Great British Energy within the first year of a Labour government. Green and growth don't just go together, they're inseparable. The future wealth of this country is in our air, in our seas, in our skies. Britain should harness that wealth and share it with all. British power to the British people.
And finally,
we are the party of the centre ground. Once again, the political wing of the British people. Say it loud and believe it. Britain will deal with the cost of living crisis. Britain will get its future back. A country where aspiration is rewarded, where working people succeed, a force for good in the world, a clean energy superpower, a fairer, greener, more dynamic nation. This is my commitment to you, the national mission of the next Labour government. And together with the British people, we will do it. Thank you, conference.
So echoes of Tony Blair, a figure for so long considered toxic after the Iraq War, but no more. Not everyone's happy within the Labour tent, especially on the left, those erstwhile supporters of Jeremy Corbyn. Remember him? Labour has been on quite a journey. But the mood is more energetic and optimistic than it's been for years, as Starmer drags the party back towards the centre and, he hopes, power. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Let's go live to Liverpool, speak to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Morning to you, Tom, or should I say the morning after the night before, because you were out with the Shadow Health Secretary last night. Not just you two personally, but there was a bit of singing, a bit of dancing. How are you feeling this morning? What's the mood there like?
Yes, this was a classic last night of conference vibe, I suppose, where we saw culminating in a party hosted by the Mirror newspaper, a whole host of shadow cabinet members and most of the press lobby in Parliament as well, and special political advisors of the Labour Party and the like, having the most remarkable karaoke session. And that is how, I suppose it's indicative of the mood of the Labour Party conference here. They feel like this is a conference that has gone well, that has united the party, that has had relatively few bumps, and of course, many people in the Labour Party celebrating their poll lead. Of course, yesterday, 17 points in Labour, bringing the average poll lead for the Labour Party up to 13 or 14 points, the sort of double-digit leads that would ensure a Labour Party majority for the first time in a general election since 2005. That's put a spring in the step of many people here at the Labour Party conference. They feel like they are on the road to victory, although clearly that may well be a bit of a worry for some, that sense of complacency, that sense that the next election is already in the bag. We know that 2 years is a very long time in politics. Clearly, 2 weeks at the moment is a very long time in politics, and I suppose one point of caution is that if we look back to 1981, for example, in February, Margaret Thatcher was 16 points behind the Labour Party in the polls. 2 years later, she won the largest parliamentary majority that the Tories held in the 20th century. Now, that's a pretty seismic turnaround in 2 years, and I suppose the Tory party will now be hoping that they can pay off a similar trick, although it will be an uphill struggle for them. Clearly, the Labour Party feeling like they've done a good job. They've hit the right note. They're balancing this tricky balancing act between, on the one hand, appealing to their left-wing supporters, saying that they would bring about a new state-owned energy company, but on the other hand, talking about fiscal discipline as well, trying to be all things to all people, and for the moment, at least, it looks like that's paying dividends in the polls, and that may well be why some members of the Shadow Cabinet, including Lisa Nandy, including Angela Rayner, including John Ashworth, were letting their hair down a little bit last night with some karaoke, and also why the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, was changing the words to Robbie Williams' Angels, singing "I'm loving Starmer" instead.
can't unsee it, Tom. I can't unhear it. It's going to scar me. Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed for that analysis. One Labour Party member who didn't get an invite to the party, of course, was the MP Rupa Hook. She's been suspended after calling the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, superficially black.
Yeah, Huck has now apologised, but her comments saying they were ill-judged.
Joining us for more is Conservative commentator who stood for Parliament in 2019, Ben Obsijekti. Very warm welcome to you. How surprised were you by these comments?
Sadly not that surprised. I think the comments that Rupa Hook made were indicative of a sort of a widely held belief amongst those on the left that people who aren't white shouldn't be Conservative and are in many ways portrayed as being race traitors, as being sort of tokens, sellouts. It's a narrative that is widely held on the left and something that I receive as sort of abuse towards me all the time.
I mean, you say widely held. I mean, very quickly, Keir Starmer acted to remove the whip, suspended her from the party. She has apologised sincerely. She hasn't had the whip reinstated. So they have taken firm action against it, and it certainly doesn't appear to be the views of Keir Starmer.
No, I agree. I think it's ironic that in moving so swiftly and removing the whip, they actually made the story about Rupa Hook. But I have limited sympathy for that and the swiftness of action that they're being credited for. The story only became a story after the audio was leaked, after the Conservative chairman, Jake Berry, wrote a letter about it. But it's worth pointing out that when Rupa Hook made these comments, she was sat next to Annalisa Dodds, who is the Shadow Equalities Minister. She wasn't tackled by Annalisa Dodds, as far as I can see. Annalisa Dodds has made no comment on it. And if she isn't willing to challenge her colleague who's sat next to her when she makes something, or says something so abhorrent, is she prepared to tackle sort of more widely held views across the general commentary?
Yeah, can you just give us an insight into, you said that you've experienced this kind of racism. Can you give us some examples?
Well, I can. So I've received 75 comments so far. I've been keeping score this year with regards to being a black Conservative. I get called a token, a sellout, an Uncle Tom, a house Negro, some other words I probably can't say on air at this time. But this abuse is sort of a constant drip. I had 3 comments on Monday. It's very much an ongoing problem, and it's not something that people necessarily see. It's very much a sort of an intra-community issue. I know that those who use that language don't perceive it to be a racial slur. They think it's quite acceptable to use, but the way that it is used to intimidate people who hold right-wing views, to be intimidatory and effectively to show them that the price of dissent is to be called out and to be sort of tempted to humiliate them.
That being said, the recent Conservative Party cabinets have been more diverse than ever, and it certainly seems, at least within the Conservative Party at the moment, you know, there is a real move to try and improve inclusivity and diversity.
I think that's just a case of getting the right people in the right places, and I think. To be honest, I think the sort of the conversation around diversity relating to sort of visual characteristics like skin colour is slightly misleading. I think it's diversity of thought that ultimately brings those people together. And you'll see that sort of the way that the cabinet is structured now is different to how it was previously. Sort of the individuals are different. I think that the fact that there are so many non-white Conservatives shows that it isn't a view that is rare on the right. That there are lots of people who hold these views, and that people shouldn't be intimidated or put off from getting involved in politics in terms of the ideal and supporting the ideology that they hold, simply because they're fearful of other people perhaps judging them and challenging them.
Is there enough social diversity, do you think, in the Conservative Party?
In terms of
back where people come from, state educated, because they tend to be Oxbridge educated, private educated, certainly in government.
I think it's difficult to say. I mean, I myself, I ran for Parliament in 2019. I wasn't privately educated. I didn't go to Oxbridge.
And we should point out Oxbridge is heavily state-educated children.
Well, quite. But
almost 50%.
Yeah.
This kind of the belief that you have to come from a certain background in order to progress in politics, I think, is an artificial one. Again, I think it's another element that perhaps deters people from getting involved who might otherwise be very keen. I think it's a case of joining a local association and sort of getting involved and seeing where it takes you.
And just lastly, your message to Rupa Hook.
I think it's interesting that no one seems to have asked Rupert Hook why she said what she said, or even though she's apologised, what she believes now, what she believed before, and why she felt those comments were acceptable. And I think that's the drilling down. That's the message that we really need to take away from this.
We're going to be speaking to someone from the Shadow Cabinet, I believe, later.
Yes,
what would
Lucy
you?
Powell.
What would you? Yeah, Lucy Powell. What would you like to? What would you like to ask her?
I'd like to know what Lucy Powell understands from what Rupert Hook said, and what she thinks Rupert Hook was trying to say, and why she thinks those views are acceptable.
Yeah.
Very interesting to talk to you. Ben Obsujekti, thank you very much. Former Conservative candidate, chairman of, I think it's your local party
Holmes
association at the moment, indeed, and a columnist as well. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. It is 8:18, and we will, of course, put those questions to Lucy Powell when we speak to her later on. But in the meantime, let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning.
Kemi Badenoch has set her sights on US investment in her first overseas visit to New York as Trade Secretary. The visit will see Ms Badenoch attempt to boost trade links between the countries. This comes after Prime Minister Truss admitted that a post-Brexit free trade deal with the US may remain out of reach for years to come.
People are being urged to have flu and COVID vaccines as experts become increasingly worried about a bad flu spike this winter. Officials at the UK Health Security Agency warn there will be lower levels of natural immunity to flu this year, following a series of winters when people socialised less during the pandemic.
Royal Mail will strike a further 19 times in the next 2 months as talks break down over pay and conditions. The Communication Workers Union says the action in October and November will run over peak mail periods such as Black Friday and the Christmas build-up.
So there is actually, do you know what, before we start, people might be wondering where Eamonn is.
Oh, you wanted to talk about Eamonn? Yes, he is in theatre as we speak, having an operation on his back. So we wish him very, very well, and we're looking forward to hearing it's all gone very well, and I'm sure it will. It's taking a short break. We understand he'll be back as soon as possible, but just a little while to recover.
Yeah, we wish you well, Eamonn. So that's just in case you're wondering where Eamonn is this morning. But also there is a new film out, isn't there?
Well, I say a lot of our viewers are missing Boris Johnson as well, I should say. And they don't have to miss him anymore because he's now starring in a new show. It's out on Sky. It's called This England, I should say, starring Kenneth Branagh. Actually, there's a picture of him on the front of the Metro this morning. It is an absolutely incredible likeness that they've managed to do there. It's all in the eyes.
There you go. Yeah, and it's basically about Boris Johnson's premiership during the start of the COVID pandemic. So there's the front page of the Metro, and here's a little clip of what you can expect.
This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this other Eden, demi-paradise.
We need some good news to announce.
I'm concerned about the lack of transparency. It could just look like jobs for the boys.
What do you think, Dom?
Our focus groups show that people will accept a lockdown if we support them financially.
I agree. Obviously, the impact on the economy would be huge.
Why haven't we met the target?
Don't blame me, Dom.
Okay, calm down, boys. I think you need to see this.
What the hell is going on? We look like a bunch of amateurs.
Had one of Dom's bright ideas. You have to rein him in.
They're moving the PM to intensive care.
This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England.
You know what? It absolutely captures the thing that has made Boris Johnson such a success as an electoral winner. He's compelling to watch. It's fascinating. I mean, we've all lived through the horrors of COVID, and I want to watch that. I really want to watch that.
Yeah, I do. And apparently, who is it who plays Matt Hancock?
Oh, I don't know who the actor is, but apparently
he does a good Matt
really
Hancock.
good likeness as well. Just saw Rishi Sunak in there and Dominic Cummings, all those old names.
Andrew.
Anyway, it's going to be worth watching, I think. Let us know if you do and what you think of it all. And it's quite fun, isn't it? Because they're very private, the Johnsons, and you get a little insight into, or an imagination into what goes on in the Downing Street flat and all those parties and Partygate that we talked about so much on this programme.
Yeah, but it'll have to go some way to beat Michael Sheen's Tony Blair.
That was incredible.
In The Queen, which was very good.
Yes, who will play Liz Truss in the next one? Who knows?
Anyway, 8:22, potential house buyers rushing to secure mortgages before a predicted rise in interest rates.
The Bank of England said on Monday it would not hesitate to hike rates after the pound hit record lows.
With some lenders clawing back mortgage deals for new customers, how easy will it be to buy a new property? Alice Porter has been finding out.
Serena is a 24-year-old charity worker hoping to buy her first property. She's urgently trying to secure a mortgage before interest rates increase even further.
My mortgage broker actually proactively called me this morning saying that she'd been advising all of her clients to get on the ladder now and just get in there, get a mortgage agreement, because interest rates are only going to go up and property prices are only going to go up. And the last thing I want to do is make a rod for my own back and wait too long, and everything's much more expensive than it is now.
So we've recently heard that some mortgage deals are being withdrawn by mortgage providers, by building societies. Is that making you feel quite panicked about your decision?
I'd rather have the time to explore my options a bit more, because right now I am restricted in that I can pretty much only get a one bed, and I was looking at, if I wait a couple of months I could maybe save up a little bit more and get a two bed, but now that option's just been completely taken away.
But not everyone can easily exchange on properties at the moment. For the hundreds and thousands of people who own properties with unsafe cladding, like Paul Afshar, they're unable to sell their homes amid spiralling costs.
In 2007, when I bought my flat, the interest on my mortgage rate was 3.5%. As of September, it's now well over 5%, and that's only going to keep going up. A big part of the problem was that I got a bad deal on my mortgage originally because I was a first-time buyer and I was buying through the government shared ownership scheme. And that bad deal, unfortunately, is coming back to haunt me with the very real and very scary prospect of spiralling costs thanks to continued interest rate rises.
Some economists have predicted that the Bank of England will raise interest rates to 5.8% by spring, which will make it less attractive to buy a new property. At the same time,
today we have cut stamp duty.
The Chancellor's announcement that stamp duty is being cut shows that the government is trying to fuel the housing market. The question is, will it benefit people if they can't afford the mortgage repayments in the first place? But estate agents are calling for calm after a turbulent few days and say even with the increases, interest rates are still low.
The biggest problems people had during Brexit times, financial crisis times and so on, was they couldn't afford to buy properties. It was a case of lenders weren't lending. So now it's a case of lenders are still lending, interest rates are still low. There is obviously concern with the market or where the market's heading, but ultimately, if something's at the right price, buyers should be buying.
For many buyers, their conundrum now is whether to fix their interest rates or wait to see if the forecasts are wrong. Alice Porter, GB News.
Lots of you getting in touch with us this morning about housing and mortgages, including Dave. Morning to you, Dave, who says, in 1967, we bought our first house for £4,000. 25% repayment rose to 16%. It was tough, but we and an entire generation pulled through and will again if we stop viewing everything through the eyes of what we can get for nothing.
Well, Kevin says, I do wish people would stop saying how they were paying 15% interest in the 70s. I lived through this time and I'll say I'd rather pay 15% on a loan for a house that was valued at 3.5 times average salary than 5% on a loan of a house that is now 10 times your average salary. Fair point. Keep your views coming in. We'll read as many as we can.
Yeah, coming up, we'll also tell you why Shakira, remember her, might be facing an 8-year...
Shakira.
There you go. That's her, facing an 8-year prison sentence.
In trouble.
Before that, the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. A bright and breezy day for many of us. Further scattered showers to come, especially around eastern and western coasts. But in between the showers, there will be some sunshine. The more prolonged rain that we saw yesterday in the southwest, now pushing away. These weather fronts responsible for that. And low pressure still close by. Isabel's a bit more spaced out, so the wind not quite as brisk, but it is still fairly breezy out there, especially in the north and down the east coast. That breeze bringing further showers to northern Scotland, into southeast Scotland, as well as parts of eastern England. Northern Isle of Wales and the southwest seeing showers as well. 1 or 2 popping up further away as well, but away from the showers, some sunny spells, and out of the wind, a little bit warmer compared with yesterday. 15, 16, perhaps 17 Celsius in some favoured spots. Into the evening, some more prolonged rain topples in from the North Sea quite quickly across eastern Scotland and then into northern England, the Midlands, as well as eventually southern parts of England and South Wales. It turns more showery as it moves south, but there will be some heavy bursts associated with that. Away from there, further showers to come into the north, but clear spells in between. And temperatures not falling quite as far. We're looking at mid to high single figures generally. So fairly bright start to Thursday. Some sunshine in places once the showery rain has moved away from the south. But further showers arrive, especially for northern England and eastern Scotland. Those showers coming in on a northeasterly breeze. And away from the showers, there will be some sunshine, but of course that northeasterly is going to make it feel cool across parts of eastern Scotland and northeast England. In the south, I think 16 or 17 Celsius out of the wind, feeling pleasant enough. However, on Friday, some heavy rain arrives from the west. That will be prolonged in the west during the morning, pushing into the east by the afternoon, accompanied by strong winds, bright spells and showers on Saturday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. In sync.
At least you both want to see us. I mean, this is good.
Well, exactly.
Could have been different.
Yeah, you go first.
The voice of David Mellor, that's a hint of what's to come. We've got the papers coming your way with Colonel Doon in just a moment. We've also got lots more coming up on the programme. At 8:45, Lucy Powell will be joining us. She's the Shadow Culture Secretary. She'll be talking to us about Rupert Hook, amongst many other things, including Sir Keir Starmer's speech yesterday.
Yeah, and at 9:15 we'll be speaking to English footballing legend Ella Toone, who scored the first goal in the Women's Euro 2022
That was
final.
quite a moment, wasn't it?
It was, which ended in victory over Germany. She'll tell us what's next for the Lionesses. Remember, you can get in touch, as usual, via email at gbviews@gbnews.uk or drop us a line on Twitter at gbnews.
Right now, Shakira, I can hardly say it without saying Shakira. But anyway,
Me too.
You're the same. That's Colonel Doon involved in this. Let's all have this interview.
I haven't got a clue about what you're talking about.
You've got a clue who she is? OK,
I'm
well,
completely
the
divorced
hips don't
from this.
lie, but you'll find out about that later. She's set to face trial in Spain over allegations of tax fraud.
Yeah, there you go. The Hips Don't Lie singer. I actually didn't know that was one of her songs.
Hips Don't Lie.
I thought you were just saying it. I didn't really know.
Because
The
she
Hips
shakes her
Don't
hips.
Lie. That was a group, was it?
No, that was one of her very famous songs.
That's what I've just
because
learned.
Shakira is the most extraordinary dancer, almost like a contortionist, to the point where her ribs can sort of touch. And she can do all this, and the
So
songs...
can you.
The Hips Don't Lie. No, but she is phenomenal.
But she is facing up to
She's
8
in
years.
trouble.
Things I learn coming on this show. It's almost worth getting up. Almost worth getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to hear this stuff.
There you go. See, the stuff you learn, eh? Yeah, she's basically accused of failing to pay 14.5 million euros in taxes on income earned between 2012 and 2014. The Colombian star has denied any wrongdoing.
Well, I know who's going to help me out in all of this. Kinsey Schofield, give me a hand. Showbiz reporter to the stars. They don't know who Shakira is.
I'm so embarrassed, Isabel. So Shakira's hips don't lie, but her tax guy, we have some questions for him, right? Prosecutors are seeking an 8-year sentence and a devastating fine if they manage to win this conviction. Shakira is arguing that she spent less than half a year during the period that they're accusing her of evading her taxes in Spain, and she rejected a plea deal that prosecutors offered her, which is why she's going to trial. This could prove to be very uncomfortable for her. However, her PR team, they insist that she has paid all in full, as well as, I believe it was 3 million euros plus, and that's just in interest.
What's she worth? I mean, is this going to make a dent in her? I mean, is this about, ideology, really? I mean, she's just... will it be hard for her to pay this if she's found guilty?
I don't think so, but to me, it honestly seems like Barcelona in Spain, they are trying to combat these celebrities that come and spend a huge chunk of their time there and don't pay taxes. There have been several sports stars that have been found guilty of tax evasion in Spain, and they actually got off pretty easy thanks to a provision where if you get sentenced to less than 2 years and you were a first-time offender, the judge can, cut you some slack. So if she is found guilty, will she ever spend 8 years in prison? Absolutely not. But it does seem like they're trying to, make a statement with her.
Wasn't she married to a Spanish footballer? Was that why she spent lots of time in Spain? The father of her children.
They were together for 11 years. He's a cheater, Isabel. He's a cheater. And if you look on Shakira's Instagram right now and any of her social media, she's really focused on her new music, and she is kind of talking about this breakup that she's had, and she's not saying anything about the tax issues.
Interesting. OK, well, all eyes will be on the courts there. Thank you for bringing us up to speed and indeed educating some of the panel here. Yeah. Appreciate it, Kinsey. See you soon.
And in a statement, Shakira told the Spanish authorities, "My tax returns don't lie."
Yeah, I see what you did there.
After the break, we'll be going through the papers with David Mellor and Claire Muldoon.
And you're not here because you put your coat with that back.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's Breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's time to go through the papers. You've heard them heckling from the sidelines for long enough. Claire Muldoon, and we've got, of course, David Mellor joining us, our Wednesday panel. David, let's start with the economic crisis. Front of the eye this morning, top of our news agenda this morning, but Kwasi Kwarteng and the Prime Minister insistent that they are confident in their plan.
Yes, and also the eye breaks this story that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were warned about the impact of the mini-budget. And this is obviously a leak from the Treasury. It's all over page 5. Can you wonder that officials are briefing against the Chancellor and the Prime Minister when they removed the most senior civil servant at the Treasury? See, one of the things I well remember from my time at the Treasury is, unless you had a good reason, you didn't fall out with your officials, not because you were frightened of them or because you were scared of saying they were wrong, but they usually weren't wrong and they knew what they were doing. And the reality is that this is going to go down in history. Look, the verdict is in, right, that cutting income tax in the way that it was reckless, on top of the huge... I mean, you know, when you get 60 billion put into trying to save people from the other expenditure issues, to then lump on top of that additional debt because you're cutting taxes is bad. So they ignored warnings over. It was said that the PM and Chancellor ignored warnings over mini-budget. Reverse tax cuts, says the front page of the Telegraph. That's what the IMF message. I mean, I remember when Dennis Healey was Chancellor, he was once dragged off a plane and forced to go and see the IMF cap in hand. Hasn't happened for 40 years.
Is that the role of the IMF to give advice on equality? Because that was their argument. These tax cuts will increase social inequality.
Almost certainly not.
None of the business.
It's none of their business. None of their business. But the point is, it's a bit like, you know, the murder of Julius Caesar. Everyone thinks, let's stick the knife in, you know. And the problem is, it's very difficult to get a hearing when you can't find anybody who is prepared of substance, who's prepared to stand up and say they agree. And you know what's going to be happening. If you go to Westminster today, I bet you'll hear a lot of noises like it's little knees knocking of Conservative MPs who suddenly realise maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all.
Well, I mean, you say suddenly realised. The MPs, of course, didn't want Liz Truss, did they? It was the membership that chose her, and it was the Rishi Brigade that were all predicting this. I was reading in the Times, Claire, this morning, that on Monday, as the markets trembled and we saw the pound reaching the lowest point against the dollar in history, Liz Truss really had to be convinced to let Kwasi Kwarteng make a statement and come out and say anything. And she was quite sanguine, expecting turbulence in the markets and prepared to ride that wave with this whole shock and awe theory that she's espoused. I mean, are you surprised or concerned to hear that she was quite happy just not to say anything? A lot of people saying, where is she? We haven't seen her.
Where is she?
I'm not surprised. I'm really not, because, you know, where's the trust in Truss? That's what everyone was saying. But, however, we've got this Prime Minister now. She has been elected by the Conservative Party membership. I think it is really unfair of them now to start... You know, there's rumblings in Westminster that they've even sent out a few notes of, no confidence. I mean, this is unbelievable. We're in the middle of a global crisis, a global economic crisis. It's not just us. We're now looking to Italy and the new PM that will be elected in there, and she wants out of Europe. Italy wants out of Europe under her. So the whole seismic shift of economics, of political landscape, it's all changing, not only in this country, not only in Europe, but globally.
David, Kwasi Kwarteng would say that the pound has stabilised over the last few days. That's what he would say. And that's what he will be saying. That's what he will be saying.
106 or 107, you know. Yeah. You know, it reminds me of Jack Kennedy was addressing a refusal of his opponents to face up to reality. And he said, it's like a policeman bending over a body in an alley and saying, 2 wounds are fatal, but the third one isn't so bad. And this is what Kwarteng is trying to do. At the end of the day, it doesn't much matter at this point what the public think. It matters what the markets think and what opinion formers think. You know, Larry Summers, very prestigious American, the condemnation that he made, this all sticks. And I just think the verdict is in and there's not much they can do about it, except change course, and that would be humiliating.
Yeah, talking of changing course, Claire, Scottish Independent, Telegraph, the front page. Our freedom fight is like Kosovo's,
I know. I mean, this is...
says the SNP.
This is the hashtag resign Sturgeon gift that keeps on giving. How dare they? I mean, our freedom fight is like Kosovo's, says the SNP. Unbelievable.
Kosovans might have something to say about that.
Absolutely. The SNP has claimed the Scottish public are a people. I mean, come on. I identify as a Scotswoman, right? OK, end of. But I'm British by sovereign, by birth, OK? We have not had another SNP vote for independence yet, although Nicola Sturgeon has advocated that she sent to the Lord Advocate in Scotland that she wants a pretendy ref, we like to refer it to as, in 2023. I'm sorry, but now she can't say that and then say, well, the next general election, why don't we make that a de facto referendum then, in case of, you know, people don't want to vote for Conservatives or they don't want to vote for Labour, they can just vote for us. And that will show them, well, I'm sorry, Nicola, wake up, smell the blooming coffee. It's not going to. The polls from the independence vote in 2013 have clearly shown there is not the appetite for independence that the SNP seems to think they have. And whilst I'm on it, I mean, how dare she even turn her back on the £240 million ferry fiasco that's made the front page of the Scottish papers this morning, and notwithstanding it's not in our papers in England and Wales. I mean, these are absolutely down to the bone fundamental points, and fundamental points that need to be discussed that the SNP are not addressing. It's almost as if it's a hot potato. No one wants to touch it. It's gone from Derek Mackay, who signed the CalMac contracts, to Nicola Sturgeon herself, who was the first Scottish minister when the contracts were given back in 2014 that Alex Salmond underwrote. But, I mean, they should never have been given. It's a complete fiasco. The NHS in Scotland is preposterous. And yet, what was trending last night? Who for the Eurovision? Let's lighten it up a bit. Shakira, Liverpool or Glasgow? Where are we going to go?
And your vote will be?
My heart says Glasgow, but my head says Liverpool.
Why?
Well, because Glasgow has the infrastructure. It's got 2 airports. It's near the ports. It's got, you know, it's for Europe. I mean, it's definitely identity that they would like to have. They ran COP26 last November, but you know, look what happened at the Edinburgh Fringe. The rubbish piling up. I don't think it's a fit city to host anything. That's why my heart would say it, because I would love it to be there for a myriad of reasons. But my head says Liverpool.
Yeah, David, have you heard of the Eurovision Song Contest?
I once represented a group who won it.
What?
Brotherhood of Man.
What, legally represented?
Save all your kisses for me.
Oh, legally represented, right. Okay.
Yeah. But the Brotherhood of Man. Now, I bet you weren't born when the Brotherhood of Man won.
I know the song, though.
Save all your kisses for me.
Just to prove I'm not completely out of it.
Can you do their dance?
And I still remember Sandy Shaw
why
being
did they need
barefoot.
representing, may I ask?
Oh, it was only a traffic offence.
Oh, OK. I was
But they wanted a class act to represent them. So I swanned into this magistrate's court like Perry Mason. Probably don't even remember Perry Mason.
I do remember Perry Mason.
Wheeled in like Ironside.
Look, I haven't had much of a life. I try and make the most of the life I had.
Oh, we love it. We love your story.
I love that. That's fantastic.
We promised we would talk about this morning, and somehow...
The Clash is another group I represent.
Wow. Really?
Because they went up on a
roof
where they were making
me.
recording and started shooting pigeons with an air rifle, and they were someone's pet pigeons.
Right.
Was that at the time of the London Calling and stuff?
I mean, when they were very famous.
So did you get them off on that charge?
I think it was a plea in mitigation. Sorry, sir, they didn't really mean it, you know. Nice boys.
Before we move on,
it all.
Manslaughter as opposed to murder.
Pigeon slaughter.
Pigeon slaughter.
Pigeons. Wow, pigeons and traffic offences. Are there any more rock or music stars you have represented legally before we move on?
Quite a lot, but I'm not
You're bound by secrecy and client confidentiality.
I mean, it was always nice, to have a well-known person on your arm as you walked into court.
Yeah, good fun. I love it. Right, should we turn our attention to serious matters? Russia, Nord Stream pipeline, a series of tremors were measured, and it's thought that this was deliberate by Putin. As Robert Fox was describing it, it was time for twist or split.
Yeah.
What do we make of this, David? Telegraph page 14.
I think that 3 different holes in 2 different pipelines. Plainly, that's not an accident. Although it's not, I don't find it that easy to work out what's in it for the Russians. The fact that this has happened, and most people, including, sensible people like Robert, having sounded out various people, thinks it was the Russians, suggests this is a very difficult world that we're living in now, because it seems like there's nothing the Russians wouldn't do. And to actually blow a hole in 3 gas pipelines is pretty reckless, because as the gas comes up, it's only got to light up, and it creates a huge explosion. I mean, this is suggesting that the whole world of international politics has moved into a much more worrying state, because nothing is any longer, it would seem, off limits.
But could you not just turn them off instead of shattering them the way he has?
I don't get what's in it for him.
No, I don't either.
At a certain point, you see, he must be banking on the fact, and one of the papers says that he is banking on the fact, I think it's the Times, that the Russians are used to putting up with things more than the Europeans. Already you've got this government in Italy, 2/3 of this coalition are Putinistas, and all he has to do is wait, and at a certain point, it's a fair bet, a number of the European countries will come cap in hand to him, and it will be back to business as normal. Personally, I don't think there can ever be business as normal again with Putin, but stranger things have happened.
And we've got this expected annexation of 15% of Ukraine coming as well.
Yeah, I mean, they have 20% turnout in 15% of the country, and what they're trying to say, but I just think it's too crazy, even for the Russians, is, so it's now part of our country, so if you attack it, we can use nuclear weapons. It's a dangerous game they're playing, because actually, although I still believe in mutually assured destruction, mad, and the fact that the Russians don't have the kind of weight of firepower that the West does, a few well-targeted Western tactical nuclear weapons would blow a hole in a whole lot of important things for Putin. So why is he playing this game? Yeah. Maybe it's desperation, or maybe if he's as ill as some people say he is, he doesn't care, because if he's not going to be around, why should anyone else be?
Right, we're going to have to leave that there, David Mellick-Clermont-Doon. Interesting though it is, because we have the Shadow Culture Secretary standing by, joining us from Liverpool. So thank you both very much indeed for that. And let's introduce then Lucy Powell. Very warm welcome to the programme. Good morning to you. Very assured speech from Sir Keir Starmer yesterday. What a contrast to the year before, where he was booed. What's your response and reaction to all of it?
Well, yes, I mean, we are very pleased with the week and how that's been going. I can hear something in my ear that's not you, sorry, Isabel, which is quite distracting. Yes, we feel we've had a very confident week this week. There's now a real possibility of a Labour government at the next election, but we're not complacent about that. But we've seen a very united front here, a good atmosphere here at conference. And that's because I think both we are coming up with the big ideas to deal with the problems the country faces, but we also now feel, I think, a heavy responsibility on our shoulders that people need an alternative to this government. People want someone else to vote for because they can see that the economy is going in the wrong direction and the policies being pursued by this government are not benefiting ordinary working people but are benefiting those at the top. So we've got a responsibility now to make sure that we are setting out those policies, those priorities, and that we are fit to govern and ready to govern. And I think that's been on display this week.
Good atmosphere and a good conference, but somewhat punctuated by that news yesterday, those comments from Rupert Huck calling Kwasi Kwarteng superficially black. How did you feel when you heard that she'd made those comments?
Well, I think those comments are wrong. They're racist, and they're incredibly stupid comments to make. And that's why Rupa has both apologised, but also she's now been suspended as a Labour MP because Keir Starmer and the Chief Whip and others in the Labour Party want to send a very clear message that those comments are unacceptable and won't be tolerated. But I don't think they should take away from what has been an incredibly important week for Labour, what was a big speech from Keir Starmer yesterday that really got the crowd going, but I think will have also engaged people watching, your viewers and others as well. I had lots of messages from my constituents who were really impressed with Keir's speech, not just how he performed it and what he said, but the content of it and the policies that he's coming up with. And I think people now have got a really clear alternative vision to the one that the Conservatives are offering.
I'm just interested, I want to ask a bit more about Rupa Hook, because I just want to know why she said those things and, whether or not there is, as many suspect, this is a view that is held by some on the left, and how you go about changing that. I mean, she's not a stupid woman. This came from somewhere. What's your understanding of why she said it and what she meant by it?
Well, I'm not even going to begin to try and justify her comments because they're not comments I would ever make, and they're not comments that I agree with. So you'll have to ask her. But they are. I think her apology says everything, which is that these are comments she totally regrets making and she shouldn't have made, and they are wrong. And I don't think we should look any deeper into that. We can draw a line under that. And as I say, Keir is very quick to act in these situations, and he's very clear about what he expects from Labour MPs, from members of the Shadow Cabinet, and indeed party members, because Keir has spent the last 2 years rooting out anti-Semitism in our party and other racism in our party, and he's not going to put that at risk by allowing these sorts of comments to go without sanction, and that's why he stepped in very quickly to deal with them.
To be clear and briefly, you think she's alone in holding those views within your party?
Well, they're not views that I share, and they're not views that I've heard expressed by anybody else. So I don't think they're reflective of anything else. And I think what you can be reassured by is that quick and clear action was taken. And that's the thing that people should look into and analyse and be clear that that's the view of the Labour Party, and that's the vast majority view of Labour Party members as well.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, or some people, are saying, Lucy, that this is a problem with the left. They're not just looking at it as an isolation case of one MP saying it. They're saying the left has a problem with people of colour exhibiting conservative views coming from a conservative background. Is that true?
Well, I don't have a problem with that. I think, look at the diversity at the top of the Conservative Party, and actually we probably have further to go in that ourselves in the Labour Party. The top of the Conservative Party is perhaps more diverse than the top of the Labour Party in some respects. But, look, I understand why you're asking me these questions, but I think really the vast majority of your viewers are far more concerned now about how they're going to be paying their energy bills. Yes, they're going to get capped, but they're still a lot higher than they were this time last year. Their food bills are going up, and they're about to see a lot of their mortgage rates going up as well. And these are not just global events. We are feeling these much more profoundly in this country because of some of the decisions that this government has taken. And I actually think they are the important issues to debate in politics right now, if you don't mind me saying.
Sure, and I'm sorry to rush you. It's only because we are limited on time, but I want to talk about energy security because Keir Starmer launched that plan yesterday within a year, if he gets into power, to set up a publicly owned UK energy company. His argument to provide jobs, growth and green power. But we want to know how that would work, and would that be in any private hands in the way I suppose you could say Channel 4 is? Give us an insight in how that would all work.
Well, you, and I'm sure many of your viewers will be aware that many other countries, France, for example, who the government-owned EDF energy company, Sweden, the Dutch, the Chinese, they all own a publicly owned energy company that they use to invest in the new energies of the future, not just making the investment, which we make in this country by often subsidising those very same companies, but that they then get the rewards in the long term back to their own taxpayers, back to their own bill payers. And many of the clean energies of the future in the UK right now are actually owned by EDF and other foreign state-owned companies. And I think many of your viewers will ask, as people have asked me over recent years, why don't the British government have a similar vehicle? So we often have a challenge in this country about how we get some of these investments off the ground. The money is there. There is government investment going into offshore wind, onshore wind, nuclear energy, but we haven't got the vehicle to really get that off the ground, and more importantly, to reap the benefits of that in the long term back to UK taxpayers and bill payers, and also provide us with that energy security, that national energy security that has been so exposed in the face of Putin's war in Ukraine, where we found ourselves vulnerable to these foreign tremors and these foreign interests. And that's why we think this is a very popular policy, and it's the right policy for the country.
Your party's being described as on the edge of power after this. It seems to have gone well, this conference. But given you suffered the biggest electoral defeat since 1935 at the last general election, where would you say you are on that uphill climb? Halfway up the mountain, 2/3 of the way up the mountain?
Well, you're absolutely right to say we had a huge mountain to climb after the 2019 election. Many of your viewers will have voted Conservative for the first time in that election, and we suffered our worst defeat since 1935, returning fewer MPs than we've had for decades. And that's why the job of actually winning the next general election is such a huge one. I think what we feel this week now, 2 years into Keir Starmer's leadership, is that is now possible. That is a possibility for us. It's not a certainty. We're not complacent about it. We've still got a huge job of work to do in setting out those big ideas, those policies, and really persuading people that they can trust Labour once again to help them deal with the issues that they're facing. But with that possibility comes a heavy responsibility. We've got to ensure that our policies are fully costed, that we do know what we're going to do if we win the next election, that the country know that our policies are sound policies, that they're ones that are going to make a difference to their lives, they're going to be for the many and not the few, and they're going to stand in stark contrast to this approach that the government are now taking, the sort of so-called trickle-down economics, where you give a tax break to a few at the top, you bring back bankers' bonuses to the City of London, and you hope that somehow that's going to trickle down to the rest of the country, to places around here near Liverpool, in the north of England and elsewhere. Well, they won't. We've tried that experiment for 30 years. It's not worked, and we need a different approach, and we need a fresh start.
OK, just finally, Lucy Powell, yesterday Sir Keir Starmer ruled out any deal with the SNP during that speech. He didn't do the same on any pact with the Lib Dems. Lots of suspicions that if a Lib-Lab pact did emerge, it could involve reneging on Brexit. Can you rule either of those things out for us this morning?
Well, Keir was very clear about our position on Brexit. We're a party that's going to make Brexit work, and part of that is about investing in our industries. That was one of the things that Brexit was supposed to deliver, which we've not seen from this government, this so-called idea of sort of state aid for British industries. That's what the GB Energy Plan is also about. Look, we are aiming for, and we are working towards a majority Labour government. We think that would be the best thing for this country, and that's why Keir was very clear in ruling out that any deal with the SNP.
Lucy, we really appreciate you taking the time to answer our questions this morning. Just before you go, have you spoken to your colleague Wes Streeting this morning? Because we saw him blasting out Angels on the karaoke last night.
I'm loving Starmer instead, apparently.
Yeah, he must be a little bit croaky this morning, we imagine.
Yes, he probably is, but he's speaking on the conference floor, so let's see what his voice sounds like when he speaks later.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for speaking to us, Lucy. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. That is the Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell with her take on the Labour Party conference as it closes today.
Yeah, and let's go through today's top stories now with former Home Office Minister Norman Bacon. Should point out, Liberal Democrat. Good morning, welcome to the programme. Interesting to hear, I suppose, Lucy Powell's denial that there was any plan for a Lib-Lab pact. What's your view on that? Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility, but look, the Labour Party is trying to win the majority of the next election, and we will try and win the maximum number of seats we can. So, you know, it's down to electorate, really, what happens, so that they will decide what the balance of power is after the last election. Clearly, the Conservatives are going to run some sort of scare story, which they always do. They have done every election since 1924.
Lib-Lab chaos.
Yeah, of course, since 1924. I would just point out that the most stable government of the last 30 years has been the Conservative Lib Dem coalition. That coalition was very stable, unlike the governments that have followed.
Well, would the price of a Lib-Lab coalition in the next election be to reverse Brexit?
Well, I'm not negotiating for the Lib Dems, and I'm not central to what they're doing. I imagine it's more important for the Lib Dems to get proportional representation than Brexit. Brexit's gone, for better or for worse, I think.
Interesting. OK. What else would you like to talk about this morning, Norman? Of course, our top story, the fallout from the mini-budget, or the Scotty budget, as some like to call it, or the kamikaze budget, whichever version you'd like to call it. What's your analysis of it all?
Or quasi tanks the pound, I think one of the headlines in the papers was. Well, I mean, look, this is chaotic. It's not a mini budget, it was quite a big budget. And the reason it was called a mini budget was in order to avoid the scrutiny by the Office of Budget Responsibility, because if it's called a budget, they have to produce something for public consumption. So it's a bit like Vladimir Putin calling his invasion a special military operation. Well, in the war, it's the same thing, really, as to what's happened here. Look, I mean, we've had 3 weeks with the government now, of the new government, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. We got complete chaos. And 2 of those weeks, of course, we were not really engaged in politics because of the Queen. So within a week, they've trashed the economy, they've plummeted the pound, they've caused the IMF to row in and say, watch what you're doing. The first time they've done that since the 1970s, and the Labour government in the 1970s. This is terrible. But it's, as I think one of the Tory ministers said, former Tory ministers, this is entirely predictable. You cannot have a situation where you raise taxes, or cut taxes and give people money back, reduce the amount of money for the government. You keep spending the way it is. And you expect everything to add up.
But they would say this is of course, you're all going to say that because you were all basing your opinion on orthodox thinking, and this is something different.
Feeling,
and the message that Kwasi Kwarteng has said to some of his more nervous Conservative MPs is hold firm. That's his message to the markets as well. You know, this is a new plan, and just bear with us. And the pound has stabilised for the last few days, admittedly around 107, 106.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, this is a sort of new plan you'd expect from a developing country that's got a corrupt government, to be perfectly honest with you. It's no sort of plan at all to run the economy in that way. And the irony, of course, is that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng are free marketeers, you know, absolutely free marketeers. And now they're objecting to what the free market is doing and reacting very quickly to their budget. And you get some of the papers. I mean, the Telegraph, interestingly enough, which is sort of the house magazine for the Tory party, you know, got the IMF on the front page, which tells you how serious this is in the view of many Conservative commentators. You've got George Osborne as the former Chancellor slagging the thing off.
William Hague as well.
William Hague. Yeah. I mean, you know, and it seems that for Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, everybody's out a step apart from them.
Interesting. In terms of the papers, the Mail and the Express have been the ones that have not necessarily tried to argue a different case, but they've just run different headlines, sort of distraction.
Exactly.
Change the subject.
Well, the Mail yesterday was saying it's all the fault of city slickers or some people in the city. I mean, why do these people in cities suddenly react this way? Is it just coincidence? No, they're reacting to what happened with the mini-budget, so-called, last Friday. I mean, I think, you know, the Daily Mail is a paper that I've had good relations with over 25 years. They've let me write articles for them. I haven't always shared their view, but I've always thought they were a good paper. I think they've lost a plot in recent days. I really do.
What do you make about Prince William not having an investiture?
Well, I mean, this is interesting, and I think it's a good idea. And I think that Prince Charles, as he was, said it was very important to slim down the monarchy. I totally agree with that for all sorts of reasons. It's actually in the long-term interest of the monarchy to do that, actually, to present themselves as more cost-effective than they have been in the past. There are serious issues about the cost of the monarchy. So I think we got some superficial changes. There'll be fewer people in the balcony. There'll be fewer royals we never heard of opening events. We've got the investiture not happening here. Charles's coronation is going to be scaled down by all accounts. So all those things, I think, are sensible in the 21st century. Yeah. But the real test will be whether or not you're scaling back the money.
Yeah. Right, OK. And do you think they will?
There's no indication they will so far. I mean, let's just be quite clear. And I think one or two of your viewers reacted rather badly when I suggested this last time. But look, the civil list was 7.9 million in 2011. The replacement sovereign grant last year was 85 million. That's in 11 years. And we've now got a link with the Crown Estates, which should never have been there. 250 years ago it was broken. It was reinstated in 2012. And the Crown Estates are doing very well, thank you, due to all these offshore wind farms, which are getting money for, and a quarter of that's going to the royal family. And that's just not right. And I think people, whether they're monarchists or not, the many people who are monarchists are saying, you know, we've got to all share the pain at the moment, and actually the royal family's not sharing the pain. So that'll be the test of Charles, in my view, is whether or not the finances are sorted out.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see how that coronation is scaled down as well. Yeah, you know, he takes an Uber to Westminster Abbey, maybe.
Well, perhaps he should do. I don't know about an Uber, but he should certainly take public transport. I was in charge of events.
To be fair, he did a lot of walking, didn't he, in the last few weeks? Let's talk about Boris Johnson, shall we? He is the star of a new show coming out called This England, starring Kenneth Branagh. They've done an amazing likeness there, particularly the eyes. I don't quite know how they've done that. Will you be watching this? Will you be indulging in sort of speculating about what went on behind closed doors?
It is a very good likeness, and I have to say that last week I went with a friend of mine to watch the Elvis film, and I couldn't believe that the person playing Elvis was actually more Elvis than Elvis was. So where these people come from, I don't know. But look, I mean, I think this is too early. Surely, I mean, Boris.
You say that, but I mean, I know newsrooms are unusual places. We've all got a particular appetite for news, but amongst our team, they all can't wait to watch this.
Well, I can't wait to watch it either, but it's still too early. It doesn't cover Partygate, I understand. You know, we haven't been able to. You need history to settle down and to form judgments on.
Too soon, you think, then?
Too soon. You need to have memoirs coming out from politicians who were there. You need to be able to assess it in the round, and this is an opportunity to get in first for Sky, I guess, but it's not, in my view, sensible to go this early.
I do think it is a symbol, or a symptom even, of how charismatic Boris Johnson is. Like him or loathe him, the fact that shows want to, you know, broadcast programmes with him as the star this soon after what was quite a traumatic time for the nation. I think that does say something about the person of Boris Johnson, the cult of Boris Johnson.
Well, you're absolutely right, I think, on that. I mean, there's no programme being planned, as far as I know, about Theresa May or Ed Miliband.
Good stuff.
Yeah, very good stuff. And Michael Sheen as Tony Blair, I think, is just extraordinary.
He was very good. Are we going to talk about Wes Streeting?
Well, we were going to, yes. Go on then, because Wes Streeting's been... He's been on that karaoke.
Yeah, we're going to go to Liverpool in a moment, but just very quickly.
I think it's great he did that. And I say that because this is a historical fact. Way back in the late 90s, my band played in the Eastbourne Lib Dem conference with television cameras everywhere. And... We consumed quite a lot of alcohol, I have to confess. And by about 1 o'clock in the morning, I was a singer in the band, rather unwisely launched into Wild Thing by the Trogs, which got covered the next day on the BBC. So there's some ghastly footage of that somewhere.
We need to see this footage, and we need to see it now. You think it's great what Wes Streeting was up to. Have you actually seen the footage? Because
I haven't seen it, but
it's scorched into my mind now. I will never be able to unsee it or unhear it.
No, I mean, it's great that he's done it. I wouldn't want to pass judgment on his musical talent.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
It's all right.
But
I'm being mean.
The lyric substitution's a bit cheesy.
Well, look, that's our analysis.
Thanks for that.
You're
welcome. Appreciate that.
Let's get the analysis of somebody who's actually there, saw it firsthand, a witness no less. Tom Harwood, what did you make of Wes Streeting's musical performance and indeed the conference as a whole?
Yes, it's quite a thing to witness. Of course, it wasn't just Wes Streeting who was up there and singing. It was also Lisa Nandy. It was also John Ashworth. It was also Angela Rayner, all having a very, very good time. And I have to say that Wes Streeting has actually been an incredibly good sport about it. He retweeted the video that I filmed of him singing Angels by Robbie Williams. I have to say also, Keir Starmer was there too. He got up and he spoke at the microphone. He gave a speech thanking the Mirror newspaper for hosting that party, although sadly didn't indulge in any karaoke himself. It seems that karaoke has become a bit of a theme of party conferences. People might remember a few years back Matt Hancock, when he was Culture Secretary, singing some pretty ropey karaoke at the Conservative Party conference. And of course, now the Deputy Prime Minister, Therese Coffey, has also been filmed at a party conference in recent years singing karaoke as well. It has become part of the British political party conference vernacular, which I think is a rather marvellous thing. But it does really feed into this jubilant mood at the Labour Party conference. People are feeling very, very positive here about their party's prospects in the next election. It feels like the party is much more united than it was last year. There were no heckles this year in Sir Keir Starmer's big speech like there were last year. There was no constitutional wrangling and big battles on the floor of the conference as there were last year too. And of course the polls have been pretty good for the Labour Party, at least at this point, with the caveat to say that polls do, of course, go up and down 2 years before the next general election. Lots of people talking about that 17-point lead by YouGov found yesterday for the Labour Party. I suppose it's worth adding in the historical context here that back in February 1981, Margaret Thatcher was 16 points behind in the polls, and 2 years later went on to win a very sizable majority in the House of Commons in the 1983 election. So perhaps some context needs to be added in this, but certainly a very confident party. And I suppose that's why the Shadow Health Secretary decided that he would change the words to Robbie Williams' Angels when he sang it last night, not singing I'm loving angels instead, but instead I'm loving Starmer instead.
Norman Baker's assessment of that was it's a bit flat, but he was talking about his tone rather than the mood or the atmosphere. Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed.
Cheers,
as
Tom.
always, enjoy the last day of conference. Not too much. I know you haven't had much sleep yourself. For work reasons, of course.
Yeah, and it's a good job. I was thinking if Starmer was singing it, would he have sung I'm loving myself instead?
Labour.
Labour.
I'm loving Labour.
I'm loving
At least
Labour
didn't
instead.
sing I'm loving the gang.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. Do you want to be in my gang? Actually, they're all in his gang when they're at Labour conferences.
Conference
with
karaoke.
Groupies. Yeah,
We'll continue next week.
What would be your conference
I
song?
imagine.
There's a theme in that. Anyway, we're going to move on. After the break, we'll be speaking to the Lioness, Ella Toon. Really excited about this. Of course, everyone was tweeting at the time, Toon, as she scored the first goal in that legendary Women's Euro 2022 final against Germany.
Toonami, first the weather.
Toonami.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A bright and breezy day for many of us. Further scattered showers to come, especially around eastern and western coasts. But in between the showers, there will be some sunshine. The more prolonged rain that we saw yesterday in the southwest, now pushing away. These weather fronts responsible for that. And low pressure still close by. Isobars a bit more spaced out, so the wind not quite as brisk, but it is still fairly breezy out there, especially in the north and down the east coast. That breeze bringing further showers to northern Scotland into southeast Scotland, as well as parts of eastern England. Northern Isle of Wales and the southwest seeing showers as well. One or two popping up further away as well, but away from the showers, some sunny spells, and out of the wind, a little bit warmer compared with yesterday. 15, 16, perhaps 17 Celsius in some favoured spots. Into the evening, some more prolonged rain topples in from the North Sea quite quickly across eastern Scotland and then into northern England, the Midlands, as well as eventually southern parts of England and South Wales. It turns more showery as it moves south, but there will be some heavy bursts associated with that. Away from there, further showers to come into the north, but clear spells in between. And temperatures not falling quite as far. We're looking at mid to high single figures generally. So a fairly bright start to Thursday. Some sunshine in places once the showery rain has moved away from the south. But further showers arrive, especially for northern England and eastern Scotland. Those showers coming in on a northeasterly breeze. And away from the showers, there will be some sunshine, but of course that northeasterly is going to make it feel cool across parts of eastern Scotland and northeast England. In the south, I think 16 or 17 Celsius out of the wind, feeling pleasant enough. However, on Friday, some heavy rain arrives from the west. That will be prolonged in the west during the morning, pushing into the east by the afternoon, accompanied by strong winds, bright spells and showers on Saturday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm excited about this next guest. She is the English footballer whose heroic goal against Germany was seen around the globe, and now, 2 months later, the country is still riding high on the Lioness's success at this year's Women's World Cup.
Now, Ella Toon is turning her attention to the local community, and she joins us now to tell us more about it. Morning to you, Ella. Really good to see you. Especially after watching you score that goal in the Euros final. How many times a day do you replay it in your head? Because it is very good.
Yeah, I replay it a lot in my head. I also replay it on my phone as well and watch it. Because, yeah, I'll never get bored of watching it back.
Yeah.
I've got to ask, Ella, it's Paul here. I do want to ask you, though, that it was the coolest finish. And under such pressure, 1-0 down against Germany, you've got 90,000 people at Wembley, it's the Euros final, and it sounds slightly like a corny question, but what was going through your head? Were you just completely calm? Did you shut it all out, or do you think, this is now the biggest chance I'm going to have in my life?
Well, I don't think I thought about it in the moment. I just thought it's another game of football and I'm in on goal, 1v1 with the keeper, so I seen her running out and I thought, the only thing I can do right now is go over her. So, yeah, I'm just glad it went in the back of the net, even though it felt like forever until it hit the net. But, yeah, unbelievable moment and something that will stay with me for forever now. But, yeah, just so proud and, yeah, don't get bored of watching it back, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, we're incredibly glad you did that too, and we don't get bored of watching it back either, let me tell you. But tell us, how has your life changed? And do you, obviously that's a positive thing, but do you feel a bit of a burden of responsibility as kind of a trailblazer for women's football?
Yeah, life's changed quite a lot since the final whistle. I think as a team we knew that things were going to change, but I don't think we knew how much. I got paparazzi'd eating a pasty, which would never have happened before. And obviously a lot more people recognise you now, but that's part and parcel of it, and that's what we wanted to help grow the women's game and to give it the recognition it deserves. And I think for us, we really love that we're now role models to so many young girls and boys growing up and wanting to be footballers. So, yeah, I think we just take it in our stride and enjoy it.
Yeah. I think they call it Papa Pasty, don't they? I think that's what they've named it now after what happened before.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's all yours. That's all yours. And by the way, that was okay, you eating that pasty, was it? Was that allowed?
I was on my 2-week break, so I was allowed to eat my pasty, yeah.
OK, well, I do want to mention the WSL because we're 2 weeks in, playing for Manchester United, and I know our friend Eamonn Holmes is extremely proud with how your team is doing because 2 wins from 2 games already, although you did miss the Spurs game, I should mention, the first one of the season, which will have to be replayed. But your hopes for the season then, and have you noticed a difference in crowds and in feelings towards the WSL since the Euros?
Yeah, this year is going to be massive for the WSL, and I think each year it grows. Obviously, after the summer, we wanted the crowds to grow and to carry that on into the WSL. And in the first 2 games already, you can see the change and the difference we've had in the support. And we just want to keep that going throughout the season. But for us as a club, we're delighted with our first 2 games and getting 6 points. And yeah, it's just going to be a really exciting season for women's football.
We're talking to you because that growth, the women's game wants to use that growth and that popularity to benefit the community.
Yeah, and I'm just so proud to be a part of helping Tesco and helping the community. I think for me, I'm massive on giving back to where I started and my grassroots club as well. I always look back on that and it helped me get where I am today. So anything I can do to help out, I'll try and do. So that's why I'm so proud to have partnered with Tesco and this scheme that they've started and them helping out with local communities.
Yeah, this is the Golden Grant Scheme. Just tell us a little bit about specifically where this kind of money gets spent, because I know from experience that grassroots football always struggles with pitches and facilities and getting people, to help organise it, finding a referee, etc.
Yeah, it's a great scheme that Tesco have set up. So on October the 15th in selected stores, you can have the chance to take a lucky dip, and if you can find one of the 100 golden tokens, you can give to a local group in your community. And I think it's massive. The money can help so much and in so many different ways, not just grassroots, but other different groups. It can help with giving out food, setting up sporting opportunities for young girls and boys to get involved in. And yeah, it's amazing what this money can do for so many people who are involved.
One more for you, coming up in a week then. I know Serena Wiegmann named the squad for these 2 friendlies coming up. We've got the World Cup coming up in 10 months. But it's the USA next, isn't it, Ella? And the world champions, and this is going to be the ultimate test for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be the ultimate test, like you say. They're the best, one of the best teams in the world, and that's who we want to compete with. We want to compete with the best teams. I think after the Euros, we've obviously got a little target on our back, and everyone wants to beat us, and we thrive off that, and we thrive off games like this. Obviously, we're back at Wembley as well in front of a sellout crowd, so we can't wait to be back there and put on another great performance and really test ourselves against the best to prepare for our World Cup in the summer.
Well, we believe in you. We think you can do it. And we're absolutely thrilled that we've been able to speak to you about it all this morning. Huge congratulations on everything and great to hear that you're giving back as well at grassroots level. That's exactly what role models like you we like to see. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Ella. Good sauce. And that should be a good game. The European champions against the world champions.
God, yeah, I tell you what, that's a humdinger.
Yeah.
Especially after that. And you know what, USA, they've got this amazing history in women's football, but we're getting closer. World Cup coming up, so who knows how far they can go. Be great.
Yeah.
All the way.
Thanks for joining us, and that's almost it from us.
Yeah, that is. You'll be back tomorrow.
I'll be back tomorrow.
It is my 40th birthday, so I'm not going to get up at 3 in the morning.
Happy
birthday!
Yeah.
Know that.
Yeah, big 4-0s
We better
coming
go and get something quickly, hadn't we?
No,
Yeah.
just pretending quietly that it's not happening and just celebrating.
Not happening.
my
Denial.
But I'll be back on Monday. You'll be back tomorrow with Rosie, and Tom Harwood is up next with a little bit of a karaoke hangover from Liverpool just after the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A bright and breezy day for many of us. Further scattered showers to come, especially around eastern and western coasts. But in between the showers, there will be some sunshine. The more prolonged rain that we saw yesterday in the southwest, now pushing away. These weather fronts responsible for that. And low pressure still close by. Isabel's a bit more spaced out, so the wind not quite as brisk, but it is still fairly breezy out there, especially in the north and down the east coast. That breeze bringing further showers to northern Scotland, into southeast Scotland, as well as parts of eastern England. Northern Isle of Wales and the southwest seeing showers as well. 1 or 2 popping up further away as well, but away from the showers, some sunny spells, and out of the wind, a little bit warmer compared with yesterday. 15, 16, perhaps 17 Celsius in some favoured spots. Into the evening, some more prolonged rain topples in from the North Sea quite quickly across eastern Scotland and then into northern England, the Midlands, as well as eventually southern parts of England and South Wales. It turns more showery as it moves south, but there will be some heavy bursts associated with that. Away from there, further showers to come into the north, but clear spells in between. And temperatures not falling quite as far. We're looking at mid to high single figures generally. So a fairly bright start to Thursday. Some sunshine in places once the showery rain has moved away from the south. But further showers arrive, especially for northern England and eastern Scotland. Those showers coming in on a northeasterly breeze. And away from the showers, there will be some sunshine, but of course that northeasterly is going to make it feel cool across parts of eastern Scotland and northeast England. In the south, I think 16 or 17 Celsius out of the wind, feeling pleasant enough. However, on Friday, some heavy rain arrives from the west. That will be prolonged in the west during the morning, pushing into the east by the afternoon, accompanied by strong winds, bright spells and showers on Saturday.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
Helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's Breakfast on GB News.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:30 and for a final time live from the Labour Party conference, this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood. We've got a packed show for you today, analysing these last 4 days in Liverpool and seeing what's next for the Labour Party. That's all to come after your morning headlines.
A very good morning. It's 9:31. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Now, the International Monetary Fund has criticised the Chancellor's tax-cutting mini-budget and urged the government to re-evaluate the measures. In a rare statement issued last night, the IMF, which monitors economies around the world, warned the Chancellor's economic plans would likely increase inequality in the UK. It's asking the government to consider providing more targeted support for families and businesses. Kwasi Kwarteng insists he's confident his strategy will deliver economic growth. He's going to meet investment banks today to try and reassure the city about his plans. Food inflation has hit its highest rate on record, with shoppers now paying 10.6% more than they were a year ago. Analysis by Kantar shows the average annual spend on grocery shopping will rise by over £530 if customers buy the same products as last year. Prices have been driven up by the war in Ukraine, which continues to push up the cost of animal feed, fertiliser and vegetable oil. It's the last day of the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. Final speeches include plans for GPs in England to give face-to-face appointments to every patient and a pledge for every primary school child to have access to a breakfast club. Ukraine's president said he'll continue to defend those living in regions that Russia could annex after so-called referendums were held there. The Kremlin claims all the regions voted overwhelmingly in favour of joining Russia. But Volodymyr Zelensky accused Moscow of brutally violating the UN statute by trying to annex territories seized by force. The public here are being urged to get a flu and COVID vaccine ahead of what experts are calling a difficult winter of respiratory viruses. The UK Health Security Agency has issued warnings of a flu spike following 2 winters mostly spent indoors because of the pandemic. Around 33 million people in England will be eligible for a free flu vaccine this year, whilst around 26 million will be able to get the autumn COVID booster. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now let's go back to Liverpool to speak to Tom for the briefing.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:33 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, live from the conference floor in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference. It's been a busy few days and what a contrast from last year's conference. Last year, you may remember Sir Keir Starmer being heckled during his big speech. A lot of fights, metaphorical fights, I should say, on the conference floor about Labour Party constitution and the rest of it. But this year, a big contrast. Let's discuss it all. I'm joined now by Barry Gardiner, the former Shadow International Trade Secretary, and Tony Diver, the Whitehall correspondent at the Daily Telegraph. Barry, let's start with you. It's been a complete change from last year. Is the Labour Party